In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a priceless sapphire brooch and a silver candelabra vanish, sparking whispers of theft. Enter Miss Jane Marple, a sharp-eyed spinster whose knitting hides a brilliant mind. When charming art dealer Victor Crane and his shady partner Edmund Langley set their sights on a fake emerald at the village bazaar, Miss Marple lays a clever trap. With the help of brave Maid Clara and nosy villagers, she unravels a web of lies, forged paintings and hidden safes. Will her quiet wisdom catch the thieves before they strike again? In this cozy mystery, secrets unravel like threads in a scarf, proving no one escapes Miss Marple's watchful eyes. Chapter 1. The Village Whisper. The sun hung low over St. Mary Mead, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold. The little village, tucked in the green folds of the English countryside, buzzed with its usual chatter. Cottages with thatched roofs lined the narrow lanes, their gardens bursting with roses and lavender. The air smelled of fresh grass and baked bread from Mrs. Price's bakery. It was a quiet place, where everyone knew everyone else's business, and secrets didn't stay secrets for long. Miss Jane Marple sat in the vicarage parlour, her knitting needles clicking softly. She was a small, neat woman with snowy white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Her pink wool shawl draped over her shoulders, and a cup of tea steamed on the table beside her. The vicarage was cosy, with lace curtains and a crackling fire. Mrs. Clement, the vicar's wife, bustled about, setting out scones and jam for the afternoon's tea. "Oh, Jane, you must have heard the news," Mrs. Clement said, her round face flushed with excitement. "The sapphire brooch is gone. Stolen right from Sir Reginald Harrow's manor." Miss Marple's needles paused. She looked up, her eyes bright with interest. "Stolen, you say? From the manor? That's quite a shock, Margaret." Mrs. Clement nodded, her hands fluttering like nervous birds. "It happened last night. Sir Reginald is beside himself. That brooch was his mother's, you know, passed down for generations, worth a fortune, they say. The police are there now, poking around." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind already turning. St. Mary Mead wasn't the sort of place for grand thefts. A missing chicken or a spat between neighbours, maybe, but a stolen jewel, that was something else. She thought of the manor, a big stone house on the hill, with its tall windows and ivy-covered walls. Sir Reginald, a kind but pompous man, loved showing off his family's treasures. The sapphire brooch, with its deep blue stone and gold clasp, was his pride and joy. "Who do they think did it?" Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but sharp. Mrs. Clement leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Well, nobody's saying for sure. But there's talk about that new fellow, Victor Crane. You know, the art dealer who moved into Rose Cottage last month. So charming, but, well, a bit slippery, don't you think?" Miss Marple smiled faintly. She'd seen Victor Crane at the village shop, a tall man with slick dark hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. He wore fancy suits, not like the tweed jackets of St. Mary Mead's men. He spoke smoothly, dropping names of London galleries and rich clients. The villagers liked him, or at least his stories, but Miss Marple had noticed how his eyes darted. Always watching, always weighing. "Slippery, perhaps," Miss Marple said, "but charm can hide a lot, Margaret. I remember a grocer's assistant, years ago, who smiled just like that. Turned out he was shortchanging customers for months." Mrs. Clement gasped. "You don't think Victor could be a thief, do you?" Miss Marple's needles clicked again. "I don't think anything yet, but I'd like to hear more. What else have you heard?" Mrs. Clement settled into a chair, eager to share. "Well, Clara, the manor's maid, told me she saw someone near the manor last night, just before the theft. A man, she said, in a dark coat. She couldn't see his face, but he was near the rose garden, where the window was forced open. And Victor's been seen walking late at night, hasn't he? Always with that big black coat of his." Miss Marple nodded, filing the detail away. Clara was a sweet girl, barely 18, with a habit of blushing when she spoke. She wasn't one to make things up. If she saw someone, it was worth noting. And Victor's late-night walks, that was interesting too. She remembered a case, long ago, where a man's nightly strolls hid a darker purpose. People in St. Mary Mead didn't wander at midnight unless they had a reason. The vicarage door opened, and the vicar, Leonard Clement, walked in, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Jane, Margaret, good to see you. I suppose you're talking about the theft. The whole village is in a tizzy. It's dreadful, isn't it?" Mrs. Clement said. "Jane thinks Victor Crane might be involved." Miss Marple raised a hand. "Now, Margaret, I didn't say that. I only said charm can hide things. We mustn't jump to conclusions." Leonard chuckled, sitting down. "You're right, Jane, you always are. But Victor's an odd one. I saw him at the church last Sunday, looking at the silver candlesticks a bit too closely. Said he was admiring the craftsmanship, but it gave me a funny feeling." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Did he? Now? That's worth remembering." The afternoon wore on, and more villagers dropped by the vicarage, each adding to the gossip. Mrs. Price, the baker, said Victor had been asking about Sir Reginald's collection, claiming he could sell it for a high price. Mr. Pye, the postman, mentioned a letter Victor got from London, with a fancy wax seal, which he thought looked suspicious. Even young Tommy, the butcher's boy, chimed in, saying he'd seen Victor sketching the manor's windows one evening. Miss Marple listened, her face calm but her mind racing. She didn't trust gossip alone. It was like knitting with tangled wool. You had to sort it out, find the pattern. But all these threads pointed to Victor Crane. Was he just curious, or was he planning something? She thought of the grocer's assistant again. How his charm had fooled everyone until she'd noticed the way he counted coins. People's habits always gave them away. As the sun dipped below the hills, Miss Marple walked home to her little cottage. The lane was quiet, except for the chirp of crickets and the distant bark of a dog. Her garden gate creaked as she opened it, and she paused to admire her roses, their petals glowing in the twilight. Inside, she lit a lamp and settled into her armchair, her knitting in her lap. The sapphire brooch was on her mind, but so was Victor Crane. She didn't like his smile, or the way he watched people without seeming to. It reminded her of a cat watching a bird, waiting for the right moment to pounce. The next morning, St. Mary Mead was still buzzing. Miss Marple walked to the village shop, her straw hat tilted against the sun. The shop was crowded, with Mrs. Weatherby and Miss Hartnell arguing over who saw Victor Crane last. Miss Marple slipped in quietly, picking up a tin of biscuits. She listened as Mrs. Weatherby, a stout woman with a loud voice, declared, "I saw him last night, near the manor. Again, he was looking at the windows. I swear it." Miss Hartnell, thin and sharp like a knitting needle, shook her head. "Nonsense. He was at the pub, playing cards with Dr. Haydock. I saw him myself." Miss Marple paid for her biscuits, her ears pricked. 2 stories, both about Victor, and both at the same time. Either someone was mistaken, or Victor was very good at being in two places at once. She stepped outside, where Clara, the manor's maid, was sweeping the shop's steps. The girl looked up, her cheeks pink. "Good morning, Clara," Miss Marple said kindly. "Busy day at the manor, I expect." Clara nodded, her broom slowing. "Oh yes, Miss Marple. Everyone's upset about the brooch. Sir Reginald's shouting at everyone, and the police are asking questions. It's awful." Miss Marple tilted her head. "You must see a lot, working there. Did you really see someone in the garden last night?" Clara's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "I told Mrs. Clement, but yes, I did. A man in a dark coat near the roses. I was closing the curtains, and I saw him. He moved so fast, I couldn't see his face." "Near the roses, you say?" Miss Marple's voice was soft, but her mind was sharp. The manor's rose garden was right by the library window where the brooch had been kept. "And what time was this, dear?" "About 10 o'clock, Clara said. "I didn't tell Sir Reginald. He'd think I was making it up." "You did right to tell Mrs. Clement," Miss Marple said, patting Clara's arm. "And if you see anything else, you come to me, won't you?" Clara nodded, relieved. Miss Marple walked on, her basket swinging. 10 o'clock. That was when Miss Hartnell said Victor was at the pub. But Mrs. Weatherby saw him near the manor. Someone was wrong, or Victor was up to something clever. She thought of a case in her youth, a man who'd used a twin brother to fool the police. Did Victor have a twin? Unlikely, but he might have a trick at the village green. Miss Marple met her nephew, Raymond West, who was visiting from London. He was a writer, full of big ideas and bigger words, but he loved his aunt's sharp mind. "Aunt Jane," he called, waving, "I hear there's been a theft." "Are you already solving it?" Miss Marple smiled. "I'm only listening, Raymond. The village talks, and I listen." "You'd be surprised what you learn that way," Raymond laughed. "You're sharper than Scotland Yard. Tell me about it." They sat on a bench, and Miss Marple told him about the brooch, Victor Crane, and Clara's story. Raymond's eyes lit up. "Sounds like a novel. This Victor, chap, he's your man, I bet. Too smooth, too new. What do you think?" "I think," Miss Marple said, "that people are like books. You have to read them carefully to see what's between the lines. Victor's charming, but charm can hide a lot. I need to know more." Raymond grinned. "You'll have him caught by tea time, Aunt Jane." "Not quite so fast," she said, but her eyes twinkled. She didn't tell Raymond about the grocer's assistant, or the Catan-bird feeling she had about Victor. She didn't need to. Her nephew thought she was just a sweet old lady, but she knew better. She'd seen too many secrets in St. Mary Mead to be fooled by a smile. That evening, Sir Reginald Harrow sent a note, asking Miss Marple to visit the manor. He'd heard she was good at solving puzzles, and he wanted her help. Miss Marple folded the note, her mind already spinning. The manor, the brooch, Victor. Crane, it was all coming together, like a pattern in her knitting. She'd go tomorrow, and she'd watch. People always showed their true colours if you watched long enough. As she went to bed, the village clock struck 9. St. Mary Mead was quiet, but Miss Marple knew it wasn't as peaceful as it seemed. Somewhere out there, a thief was hiding, and she was going to find him. She thought of Victor's smile, Clara's nervous glance, and the sapphire brooch glinting in her mind like a clue. This was only the beginning, but Miss Marple was ready. She always was. The next day dawned bright, and Miss Marple set out for the manor. Her black shoes crunched on the gravel path, and her hat bobbed as she walked. The manor loomed ahead, its grey stone walls solid and proud. Sir Reginald met her. At the door, his face red with worry. "Miss Marple, thank you for coming," he said, leading her inside. The hall was grand, with polished wood and paintings of stern ancestors. "This theft, it's a disgrace. My mother's brooch, gone. I need your help." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes scanning the room. A glass case stood empty in the library, where the brooch had been. The window nearby was scratched, as if forced open. She listened as Sir Reginald ranted about the police, the thief, and the shame of it all. But she wasn't listening to his words. She was watching his hands, his eyes, the way he stood. "People always told you more than they meant to. Tell me about last night," she said. "Who was here? What happened?" Sir Reginald puffed out his chest. "Just the usual me, Lady Harrow, the staff. We had dinner, then I checked the case. Before bed, the brooch was there at 9. By morning, it was gone. And this Victor Crane," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. "Has he been here?" Sir Reginald frowned. "Once or twice. Said he could value my collection. Seemed keen, but I didn't let him near the case. Do you think he's involved?" "I don't think anything yet," Miss Marple said. "But I'd like to look around, if I may." She wandered the library, her fingers brushing the bookshelves. The window was low, easy to climb through. The rose garden outside was trampled, just a little, near the sill. She thought of Clara's story, a man in a dark coat. Victor wore a dark coat, didn't he? But so did half the men in the village. She needed more. Lady Harrow joined them, her face pale. "It's dreadful, Miss Marple. That brooch was my mother-in-law's. Who would do such a thing?" "Someone who wanted it badly," Miss Marple said, "or someone who knew its value." She asked about the staff, the guests, the locks. Lady Harrow mentioned Victor again, saying he'd been charming at a dinner party, asking about the brooches. "History," Miss Marple nodded, storing it away. "Charm, again. It was always charm." As she left the manor, Miss Marple saw Victor Crane himself walking down the lane. He tipped his hat, his smile wide. "Good morning, Miss Marple. Lovely day, isn't it?" "Very lovely," she said, smiling back. But her eyes were on his coat, his shoes, the way he moved. Smooth, like a dancer. Too smooth, perhaps. She thought of the grocer's assistant, counting coins in the dark. Victor was counting something too. She could feel it. Back home, Miss Marple sat by her window, knitting and thinking. The village was talking, and she was listening. The sapphire brooch was gone, but it had left a trail. Victor Crane was part of it, she was sure. But how and why? She didn't have the answers yet, but she would. She always did. The days passed, and the village kept buzzing. Miss Marple went to tea, to church, to the shop, always listening. Clara came to her one afternoon, nervous and fidgeting. "Miss Marple, I saw him again," she whispered. "Victor, near the manor, last night. He was looking at the windows again." Miss Marple patted her hand. "Thank you, Clara. You're a brave girl. Keep watching, but be careful." Clara nodded and left, and Miss Marple's needles clicked faster. Victor was bold, too bold. He was planning something, but what she thought of the auction idea, the trap she'd mentioned to Raymond in passing. Maybe it was time to set it. A thief like Victor wouldn't resist a bigger prize, and Miss Marple knew just how to tempt him. By the end of the week, the village was alive with plans for the annual bazaar. Sir Reginald, still fuming, agreed to host a jewel display to raise funds. Miss Marple suggested adding a new emerald, a fake one, to draw the thief out. Sir Reginald liked the idea, and so did Inspector Craddock, who arrived to take charge. "Miss Marple, you're a wonder," Craddock said, grinning. "If this works, we'll have our thief." "Not just yet," she said, her eyes twinkling. "But we're getting closer." As the bazaar approached, Miss Marple watched Victor. He was everywhere, chatting at the pub, helping at the church, smiling at everyone. But she saw the way his eyes lingered on the manor, the way his fingers twitched when jewels were mentioned. He was a cat, and the emerald was his bird. She'd make sure he pounced, and when he did, she'd be ready. The chapter ends with Miss Marple in her garden, pruning her roses. The village is quiet, but the air feels heavy, like a storm coming. She knows the thief is close, and her trap is just beginning to take shape. Victor Crane may be cunning, but Miss Marple is cleverer. And in St. Mary Mead, clever always wins. Chapter 2. The missing sapphire. The morning sun spilled over St. Mary Mead, turning the dew on the grass into tiny diamonds. Miss Jane Marple walked up the gravel path to Harrow Manor, her black shoes crunching softly. Her straw hat sat neatly on her white hair, and her basket swung lightly on her arm. She looked like any old lady out for a stroll, but her sharp blue eyes missed nothing. The manor loomed ahead, its grey stone walls stern and proud, like a guard keeping secrets. Sir Reginald Harrow had asked her to come, and Miss Marple never turned down a puzzle. The theft of the sapphire brooch had the village in a flutter. Wasn't just any jeweller, deep blue stone, big as a robin's egg, set in a gold clasp shaped like a rose. It had belonged to Sir Reginald's mother and his grandmother before that. To him, it was more than money. It was family, honour, history. To a thief, it was a fortune. Miss Marple thought of Victor Crane, the new art dealer in Rose Cottage, with his slick smile and darting eyes. The village whispered his name, and Clara, the maid, had seen a man in a dark coat near the manor's rose garden the night of the theft. Victor wore a dark coat, didn't he? But Miss Marple knew better than to trust whispers alone. Whispers were like loose threads in her knitting. You had to pull them carefully to see the pattern. Sir Reginald met her at the manor's heavy oak door. His face was red, his moustache twitching like an angry cat's whiskers. "Miss Marple." "Thank goodness," he boomed, leading her inside. "This is a disaster. My mother's brooch stolen. The police are useless, poking around, asking silly questions. I need your sharp mind." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes gentle but keen. "I'll do what I can, Sir Reginald. Tell me everything from the start." They walked through the grand hall, past portraits of Harrows with stern faces and stiff collars. The air smelled of polish and old wood. Sir Reginald led her to the library, a long room with tall windows and shelves of leather-bound books. At the far end stood a glass case, empty now, its lock scratched and bent. The sapphire brooch had sat there on a velvet cushion until last night. "It was here," Sir Reginald said, pointing at the case. "I checked it myself at 9 o'clock after dinner. Locked tight. By morning it was gone. The window there." He waved at a low window by the rose garden, was forced open. Scratches on the sill, footprints in the dirt. The thief knew what he was doing. Miss Marple nodded, stepping closer to the case. The lock was small, delicate, not hard to pick, if you had the right tools. She ran her finger along the glass, noticing a smudge, faint but there. Dust clung to it, like it had been touched recently. She filed that away, like a stitch in her knitting. Then she moved to the window. The sill was scratched, just as Sir Reginald said, and outside, the rose garden soil was soft, with faint marks where someone had stepped. She thought of Clara's Storia, man in a dark coat, moving fast. The roses were trampled, just a little, near the window. Someone had been careless, or in a hurry. Was anyone else here last night? Miss Marple asked, turning to Sir Reginald. Guests, staff. Just the usual, he said, rubbing his chin. Lady Harrow, myself, the servants. Clara was tidying up, and the cook was in the kitchen. Oh, and old Jenkins, the gardener, was pottering about outside until dark. No guests, no strangers. Except he paused, and Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. Except, well, Victor Crane came by a few days ago, Sir Reginald said he wanted to value my collection. I showed him some paintings, but not the brooch. He was very interested, though. Asked a lot of questions about the manor's history. Seemed harmless, but now I wonder. Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd been knitting. Victor again. Always Victor. She thought of the grocer's assistant from years ago, how he'd charmed everyone while slipping coins into his pocket. Victor's charm was the same, smooth as butter, but butter could hide a bitter taste. Did he see the case? She asked. No, Sir Reginald said firmly. I kept him in the drawing room. But he's been to the village fetes, hasn't he? He might have seen it then. Miss Marple nodded. The brooch was often displayed at village events, locked in its case but sparkling for all to see. Anyone could have noticed it, wanted it, but Victor wasn't anyone. He was an art dealer, with an eye for value and a tongue for flattery. She needed to know more about him. Lady Harrow joined them, her silk dress rustling. She was tall, with greying hair and a worried frown. Miss Marple, this is awful, she said, twisting her hands. That brooch meant so much to Reginald's mother. Who would steal it, and why? Greed, perhaps, Miss Marple said softly, or something else. Tell me, Lady Harrow, has anyone new been to the manor lately? Besides Mr. Crane, Lady Harrow thought for a moment. Not really. Just the usual Dr. Haydock for tea, the vicar for chess. Oh, and my cousin Edmund, from London. He visited last week, but his family, not new. Miss Marple's ears pricked. Edmund. A new name. Even if he was family. And what's he like, your cousin? Oh, Edmund's a dear lady, Harrow said, smiling faintly. A bit of a dreamer, always talking about his art business in London. He's had some bad luck lately, money troubles, but he's harmless. Miss Marple nodded, but her mind was busy. Money troubles, that was a thread worth pulling. She thought of a case in St. Mary Mead, years ago, where a man with debts had done desperate things. Edmund might be harmless, or he might not. She'd keep his name in mind. Inspector Craddock arrived, his boots loud on the polished floor. He was a young man, with a square jaw and a nonsense look, but he respected Miss Marple. Morning, Miss Marple, he said, tipping his hat. Sir Reginald, I've got men searching the grounds. We found a scrap of cloth on the rosebush black. Wool, looks like from a coat. And the footprints are fresh, size 10. I'd say Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. A black coat. Victor's coat was black, wasn't it? But so were many others. Any fingerprints, Inspector? She asked. Not yet, Craddock said. The case is clean, too clean. The thief knew to wipe it down. but we'll keep looking. Miss Marple walked to the window again, peering at the rose garden. The bushes were old, their thorns sharp. A scrap of black wool meant someone had been careless or rushed. She thought of Victor's smooth walk, his quick eyes. Was he careless? She didn't think so. But someone had been. May I speak to the staff? Miss Marple asked Sir Reginald. They see things, you know, things we might miss. Of course, he said, waving a hand. Clara's in the kitchen. Jenkins is outside. Ask anyone you like. Miss Marple found Clara washing dishes, her hands red from hot water. The kitchen smelled of bread and herbs, and a kettle whistled on the stove. Clara looked up, nervous. Miss Marple, did you find anything? Not yet, dear, Miss Marple said, sitting at the table. But you might help. Tell me about last night. Everything you saw, even if it seems small. Clara wiped her hands. On her apron, her cheeks pink. I told you about the man in the garden, didn't I? Near the roses, at 10 o'clock. I was closing the library curtains, and I saw him. He was tall, I think, but it was dark. I didn't see his face. Was he alone? Miss Marple asked. Clara nodded. I think so. I didn't see anyone else. But, well, it's silly, maybe. Nothing's silly, Miss Marple said kindly. Tell me. Clara hesitated. I heard a noise, like a twig snapping, just before I saw him. And earlier, at dinner, Mr. Crane was here. Not for dinner, but he dropped by to talk to Sir Reginald. He left before 9, but he was asking about the brooch. Said he knew a buyer in London. Miss Marple's needles would have clicked faster if she'd had them. Victor asking about the brooch, dropping by, then gone before the theft. But close enough to see the case, maybe. Did he go near the library? She asked. Clara shook her head. Not that I saw. Sir Reginald kept him in the hall. But he was, I don't know, sneaky. Kept looking around, like he was measuring the place. Miss Marple smiled. You're a good observer, Clara. If you see him again, tell me. Won't you? Clara nodded, relieved. Miss Marple left the kitchen and found Jenkins, the gardener, near the rose bushes. He was an old man, bent like a tree in the wind, with dirt on his hands and a pipe in his mouth. Morning, Miss Marple, he said, touching his cap. Heard. You're helping with the theft. I'm trying, she said. These roses are lovely, Jenkins. Did you see anything odd last night, near the library window? Jenkins puffed his pipe, thinking. Well, now you mention it, I was here till dark, pruning. Saw Mr. Crane walking by, about 8. He waved, all friendly, but he was looking at the windows, thought he was just curious. Now I'm not so sure. Miss Marple's heart skipped. 8 o'clock, close to the theft, but not quite. Did he stop or just walk by? Just walked, Jenkins said. But slow, like he was studying something. He's an odd one, that Crane, always poking about. Miss Marple thanked him and walked back to the manor, her mind spinning. Victor at 8, a man in a dark coat. At 10, the timing was tight. Could Victor have come back, or was someone else involved? She thought of Lady Harrow's cousin, Edmund, with his money troubles. Family could be tricky, she knew. She'd seen it before nephew who'd stolen from his aunt, thinking it wasn't really stealing if it was family. Back in the library, Inspector Craddock showed her the scrap of cloth. It was small, black, rough, like wool. Could be from a coat, he said. We're checking it. But no prints, no other clues. This thief's clever. Very clever, Miss Marple said, touching the cloth. It felt familiar, like the coat Victor wore. But she didn't say that. She needed proof. Not guesses. Have you checked the village, Inspector? Anyone new besides Mr. Crane? Craddock nodded. We're asking around. Nobody stands out, except him. He's got no record, but he's new, and he knows art. Jewels, too, I'd wager. We'll keep an eye on him. Miss Marple left the manor, her basket heavier with thoughts than biscuits. The village was busy now, with carts rattling and children playing on the green. She saw Victor Crane outside the shop, talking to Mrs. Price, the baker. His laugh carried, bright and smooth, but his eyes flicked to Miss Marple, just for a second. She smiled back, like she hadn't noticed. But she had. He was watching her, just as she was watching him. At home, Miss Marple sat by her fire, knitting. A scarf. The wool was soft, but her thoughts were sharp. Victor was in the middle of this, she was sure. His questions, his walks, his charm, it all fit. But the timing bothered her. 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and that scrap of cloth. Was he working alone, or was there another hand in the game? She thought of Edmund, of Clara's nervous glance, of the smudge on the case. It was like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But Miss Marple loved puzzles. She'd find the pieces, one by one. That evening, she went to the vicarage for tea. Mrs. Clement was there, full of gossip. Jane, they say Victor's been asking about the bazaar. She said, wants to help. With the jewel display, isn't that bold, if he's the thief? Very bold, Miss Marple said, sipping her tea. But boldness can be a mistake. Tell me, Margaret, what else is he saying? Mrs. Clement leaned in. He told Dr. Haydock he's got a buyer for rare gems. Said he could get a fortune for something like the brooch. And he's been seen near the manor again, late at night. Miss Marple's needles clicked. A buyer, late-night walks. The threads were coming together, but not quite. She needed to see Victor, talk to him, watch him. People always gave themselves away, if you knew where to look. The next day, she met Raymond West at the village green. He was full of ideas, as usual. Aunt Jane, I've been thinking, he said. This Victor, he's your thief, isn't he? Why don't we set a trap? Put out another jewel, see if he bites. Miss Marple smiled. Raymond was clever, but impatient. A trap might work, she said, but it has to be cleverer than he is. He's no fool, Raymond. You'll outsmart him, Raymond said, grinning. You always do. Miss Marple didn't answer. She was thinking of the bazaar, the jewel display, the fake emerald she'd mentioned to Sir Reginald. A trap was forming in her mind, like a pattern in her knitting. Victor wanted jewels, didn't he? She'd give him one and see what he did. But she'd watch everyone else, too. Thieves weren't always alone. As the chapter closed, Miss Marple stood in her garden, her roses glowing in the dusk. The village was quiet, but the air felt heavy, like before a storm. Victor Crane was out. There, smiling, planning. But so was she, and Miss Marple's plans were always better. Chapter 3. A glimpse of Motivy. Morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, curling around the chimneys and softening the edges of the cottages. Miss Jane Marple stepped out of her neat little house, her black shoes tapping on the stone path. Her straw hat was pinned firmly to her white hair, and her basket held a ball of pink wool and her knitting needles. She looked like any old lady heading to the village, but her blue eyes were sharp, scanning the quiet lanes for anything out of place. The theft of Sir Reginald Harrow's sapphire brooch had stirred the village like a spoon in a teacup, and Miss Marple was determined to stir it some more. The manor theft was all anyone could talk about. The sapphire, a deep blue gem in a gold rose clasp, was more than a jewel, it was a piece of Harrow history, and its loss stung Sir Reginald like a bee. Victor Crane, the new art dealer in Rose Cottage, was the name on everyone's lips. His slick smile and fancy suits made him stand out in St. Mary Mead, where tweed and plain talk were the norm. Clara, the manor's maid, had seen a man in a dark coat near the rose garden the night of the theft, and Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8 o'clock. A scrap of black wool, caught on the roses, matched the coat Victor wore, but Miss Marple knew better than to trust a single thread. She needed the whole pattern. She headed to the village hall, where her friend Dolly Bantry was organizing the annual bazaar. The hall was a bustle of activity tables, covered with lace doilies, jars of homemade jam, and stacks of knitted scarves. Dolly, a cheerful woman with a loud laugh, waved Miss Marple over. "Jane, you're just in time. We're setting up the tea stall. But I suppose you're thinking about that theft, aren't you?" Miss Marple smiled, setting her basket down. "It's hard not to, Dolly. The village is full of talk. What have you heard?" Dolly leaned close, her eyes bright with gossip. "Oh, plenty. Everyone's pointing at Victor Crane. Did you know he was at the manor just days before the theft? Asking Sir Reginald about his collection, bold as brass. And last night, at the bridge game, he let slip something interesting. Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd been knitting. Did he? Now, what did he say?" Dolly lowered her voice, though the hall was noisy. "We were playing at the vicarage, me, Colonel Bantry, Dr. Haydock, and Victor. He was charming, as usual, but when the talk turned to money, he got quiet. Then he said something about needing a big sale to clear some debts. Debts, Jane. And he mentioned knowing a buyer in London who'd pay a fortune for rare gems. Like that sapphire, don't you think?" Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Debts, that was a strong thread, one that could pull a man like Victor into trouble. She thought of a case years ago, a shopkeeper in St. Mary Mead who'd stolen from his own till to pay off a loan. Desperation made people bold, and Victor's smooth talk might hide a desperate heart. "That's very interesting, Dolly," she said. "Did he say anything else?" "Not much," Dolly admitted. But he was fidgety, kept checking his watch. And when Dr. Haydock mentioned the theft, Victor changed the subject fast. Said he'd love to help with the bazaar, maybe even display some art. But I saw his eyes, Jane. They were sharp, like he was planning something. Miss Marple nodded, her mind spinning. Victor's debts, his interest in gems, his quick change. Of topic it all fit, like stitches in a row. But she needed more. Gossip was useful, but it was like tea leaves. You had to read it carefully to see the truth. She helped Dolly arrange teacups, listening as the village women chattered. Mrs. Price, the baker, said Victor had bought a loaf, but paid with a crisp new note, odd for a man with debts. Miss Hartnell, sharp and nosy, swore she'd seen him near the manor again, late at night, carrying a small bag. Miss Marple stored every word like buttons in a jar. After the hall, she walked to the village shop, where Mr. Pye, the postman, was sorting letters. The shop smelled of soap and apples, and the counter was cluttered with jars of sweets. Mr. Pye looked up, his glasses glinting. "Morning, Miss Marple. Heard you're helping with the theft. Any luck?" "Not yet," she said, picking up a tin of tea. "But I'm curious about Victor Crane. You deliver his post, don't you? Has he had any interesting letters? Mr. Pye grinned, eager to share. Oh, He gets a lot of mail from London, fancy envelopes, some with seals. One came yesterday, from an art firm, looked like, but there was another, a week ago, plain but heavy. Felt like it had papers inside. He snatched it from me quick, like he didn't want me looking. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Papers. A man with debts might get letters about money, bills, threats, or worse. She thought of a case in her youth, a man who'd hidden stolen goods in a stack of letters. Did you see the sender? She asked. No. Return address, Mr. Pye said, but it was posted from London. He's got connections there, hasn't he? Art dealers, maybe. Miss Marple said, paying for her tea. Connections, that was another thread. Victor wasn't just a village newcomer. He had a life in London, one St. Mary Mead didn't know. She needed to see him, talk to him, watch his eyes. People always gave themselves away if you looked closely. She stepped outside and saw Victor, himself, crossing the green. He was tall, his dark coat swinging, his hair slicked back. He tipped his hat, his smile wide. Miss Marple, out enjoying the day. It's a fine one, she said, smiling back, but her eyes were on his coat black wool, just like the scrap on the roses, and his shoes, polished but with a smudge. Of dirt, garden dirt, perhaps. You're settling in well, Mr. Crane. The village likes you. He laughed, a smooth sound. They're kind here. I'm hoping to help with the bazaar, maybe show some paintings, raise a bit of money. That's generous, Miss Marple said. You must be busy with your art business. Do you travel to London often? His smile didn't waver, but his eyes flicked, just for a second. Not lately, too much to do here. But I've got friends there, buyers, who like rare things. Gems, paintings, that sort of thing. Gems, Miss Marple repeated, her voice soft, like Sir Reginald's brooch. Victor's laugh was quick, a little too quick. Oh, that's a beauty, isn't it? Shame it was stolen. But I wouldn't know about that. I'm just an art man, not a jewel thief. Of course, Miss Marple said, her smile sweet. But her mind was racing. He'd called the brooch a beauty, but Sir Reginald said he hadn't shown it to Victor. Had he seen it at a fete or somewhere else? She thought of Clara's story, the man in the dark coat. Victor was smooth, but smooth things could slip. She said goodbye and walked on, her basket swinging. The village was alive now, with children chasing a ball and Mrs. Weatherby sweeping her steps. Miss Marple headed to the church, where the Leonard Clement was polishing the brass. The church was cool and quiet, its windows glowing with coloured light. Leonard looked up, his glasses slipping. Jane, come to pray for the thief's soul. She chuckled. Not yet, Leonard. I'm still looking for him. Tell me, have you seen Victor Crane here lately? Leonard nodded, wiping his hands. Last Sunday, after service, he was looking at the silver candlesticks, said he admired the craftsmanship, but he stayed longer than most, just staring. Gave me a funny feeling. Miss Marple's needles would have clicked. The candlesticks, silver, old, valuable. Was Victor eyeing more than the brooch? She thought of a case years ago, a man who'd stolen from a church, thinking no one would suspect. Did he ask about them? She said. Just said they'd fetch a good price in London, Leonard said. Joked about it, but it didn't feel like a joke. Miss Marple thanked him and sat in a pew, her mind busy. Victor was everywhere. Church, village. his debts, his London buyers, his late-night walks. It was too much to be chance. But something nagged her. The timing of the theft, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock. The scrap of cloth. Clara's man in the dark coat. Was Victor working alone, or was there another player? She thought of Lady Harrow's cousin, Edmund, with his money troubles. Family could be as cunning as strangers. That afternoon, she visited Dolly Bantry again, this time at Bantry Hall. The big house was warm, with flowers in every room and a fire crackling. Dolly poured tea, her hands quick. "Jane, you're deep in this theft, aren't you? Have you figured out Victor yet?" "Not quite," Miss Marple said, sipping her tea. "But I'm learning. Tell me more about that bridge game. Did Victor mention anyone else? Friends, perhaps?" Dolly thought, her brow creasing. "He did mention a man in London, someone he works with. Said he was an art dealer, too, but struggling. Needed a big sale to stay afloat. Sounded like Victor was in the same boat." Miss Marple's heart skipped. A struggling art dealer. Edmund, perhaps, or someone else. She needed to know more about Victor's London life. "Did he give a name?" she asked. "No," Dolly said, "but he got a letter during the game. Brought by Tommy, the butcher's boy. Victor read it and went pale, then stuffed it in his pocket. Said it was nothing, but I didn't believe him." Miss Marple nodded. Another letter, like the one Mr. Pye mentioned. She thought of a case where a letter had been the Kia blackmail note, hidden in plain sight. Was Victor being pushed, or was he pushing someone else? She thanked Dolly and left, her mind full of threads. Back in the village, she saw Clara, running across the green, her face white. "Miss Marple," she gasped, stopping short. "I found something. In the manor's garden, near the roses. You said to watch, so I did." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Show me, dear." They hurried to the manor, where Clara led her to the rose garden. The bushes were thick, their thorns catching at Miss Marple's skirt. Clara pointed to a spot near the library window, where the soil was soft. "There," she said. "I was weeding, and I saw it." Miss Marple knelt, her knees creaking. Half buried in the dirt was a small metal tool, like a thin knife, its handle worn. A lockpick, she thought, the kind a thief might use. She wrapped it in her handkerchief and tucked it into her basket. "Well done, Clara," she said. "Don't tell anyone yet, not even Sir Reginald." Clara nodded, her eyes wide. Miss Marple stood, brushing dirt from her hands. A lockpick. It was a strong thread, pointing straight to Victor. But why leave it behind? Was he careless, or was it planted? She thought of the grocer's assistant, how he'd left a coin on the floor, thinking no one would notice. But she'd noticed, and she'd noticed this, too. She took the lockpick to Inspector Craddock, who was at the manor, questioning the staff. He turned it over in his hands, his face grim. "This is something, Miss Marple, could be our thief's tool. We'll check it for prints, but it's old, worn, might not tell us much. Every little bit helps," Miss Marple said. "Have you learned anything new about Mr. Crane?" Craddock nodded. "We checked his cottage. Nothing obvious, no jewels, no tools. But he's got a safe, hidden behind a painting, locked tight. We need a warrant to open it." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. A safe, that was interesting. What did Victor hide? Stolen goods, or something else? She thought of a case where a thief had kept letters in a safe, proof of his crimes. "Keep watching him, Inspector," she said. "He's clever, but clever. People make mistakes, That evening, Miss Marple sat by her fire, knitting and thinking. The lockpick, the safe, the letters, the deadsit, all circled Victor Crane. But the pattern wasn't clear yet. Was he the thief or a pawn? She thought of Edmund, of the man in the dark coat, of the smudge on the glass case. The bazaar was coming, and her trap was taking shape. A fake emerald, a public display, a chance to catch a thief. Victor would be there, she was sure, and she'd be watching. The village clock struck 9, its chimes soft in the dark. St. Mary. Mead was quiet, but Miss Marple knew it held secrets. Victor Crane was one of them, and she was getting closer. Her needles clicked, steady and sure, like her thoughts. The trap was set, and soon someone would step into it. Chapter 4. The Tuesday night club, revived. The evening air in St. Mary Mead was cool, with a hint of autumn in the breeze. Miss Jane Marple's cottage glowed warmly, its windows spilling light onto the rose bushes outside. Inside, the parlour was cosy, with a crackling fire, lace curtains, and a tray of tea and scones on the table. Miss Marple sat in her favourite armchair, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on a pink scarf. Her white hair was neat under a laced cap, and her blue eyes sparkled with quiet purpose. The village was still buzzing about the stolen sapphire brooch from Harrow Manor, and tonight she'd invited a few friends to talk it over. She called it a little gathering, but in her mind it was a revival of the old Tuesday night club, where stories and secrets unravelled over tea. The sapphire theft had stirred St. Mary Mead like a storm in a teapot. The brooch, a deep blue gem, in a gold rose clasp, was Sir Reginald Harrow's pride, and its loss had him red-faced and shouting. Victor Crane, the slick art dealer in Rose Cottage, was the village's favourite suspect. Clara, the manor's maid, had seen a man in a dark coat near the rose garden the night of the theft. Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8 o'clock. A scrap of black wool caught on the roses matched Victor's coat, and a lockpick found in the garden pointed to a clever thief. Dolly Bantry had heard Victor talk of debts and a London buyer for gems, and Mr. Pye, the postman, mentioned his suspicious letters. Miss Marple's mind was like her knit clue, a stitch, slowly forming a pattern. But she needed more threads, and tonight's guests might have them. The doorbell chimed, and Miss Marple rose to greet her nephew, Raymond West, and his wife, Joan. Raymond, a writer with a quick smile and big ideas, hugged her Aunt Jane. "Are you solving the theft already? You've got that look in your eye." Miss Marple chuckled, patting his arm. "I'm only listening, Raymond. The village has a lot to say." Joan, a painter with bright eyes, set a cake on the table. "The whole place is talking about Victor Crane. He's so charming, but I don't trust him. He asked me about my art, but it felt like he was sizing me up." Miss Marple nodded, filing that away. Victor's charm was like a shiny apple pretty, but maybe rotten inside. She thought of a grocer's assistant years ago, whose smile hid sticky fingers. Victor's smile was just as smooth, and she wanted to see what it hid. Next came Sir Henry Clithering, a retired Scotland Yard man with a kind face and sharp mind. He'd known Miss Marple for years and trusted her instincts. "Jane, you've got a mystery on your hands," he said, settling into a chair. "This brooch business, it's got the makings of a good case." "I hope so," Miss Marple said, pouring tea. "But I need your help, all of you. Let's talk about the theft and see what we know." The fire crackled as they sipped tea, the scones disappearing fast. Miss Marple steered the talk to the manor, the brooch, and Victor Crane. She didn't accuse him outright, that wasn't her way. She asked gentle questions, letting her guests fill in the gaps. It was like knitting a tricky stitch. You had to ease the wool along, not force it, Raymond started, his voice eager. I saw Victor at the pub yesterday, Aunt Jane. He was chatting up Dr. Haydock. All smiles, but he kept glancing at the door, like he was expecting someone. And when the theft came up, he got cagey. Said he was at home that night, but no one saw him there. Miss Marple's needles paused. No alibi. That was a loose thread. Did he say anything about the brooch? She asked. Not directly, Raymond said. But he mentioned rare gems, how they're hard to sell without the right buyer. Sounded like he knew more than he let on. Joan nodded, brushing crumbs from her skirt. He's been to our house, too, looking at my paintings. Asked if I ever sold to collectors in London. I thought he was just being friendly, but now I wonder. He kept talking about money, how a big sale could change everything. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Money again, Dolly Bantry had mentioned. Victor's debts, and now Joan's story added weight. She thought of a case in St. Mary Mead, a man who'd sold stolen silver to pay his bills. Victor's talk of buyers and big sales felt familiar, like a pattern she'd seen before. Sir Henry leaned forward, his tea untouched. I've been asking around, Jane. Victor's got no police record, but he's known in London art circles. Bit of a gambler, they say, and not always lucky. Owes money to some shady types. A man like that might see a sapphire as a quick fix. Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking again. Debts, gambling, shady types. The pattern was growing, but it wasn't complete. Has anyone seen him near the manor lately? She asked, her voice mild. Joan frowned. I saw him walking that way 2 nights ago, late. He had a flashlight, which I thought was odd. Said he was looking for his pen, dropped it on a walk. But who needs a flashlight for a pen? Miss Marple's heart skipped. A flashlight, late at night. Clara had seen a man in a dark coat at 10 o'clock, and Jenkins had spotted Victor at 8. Was he circling the manor, planning his move? She thought of a thief she'd known, who'd walked the same street every night to learn the locks. That's very interesting, Joan, she said. Anything else? Raymond grinned. He's been cozying up to Clara, the maid. Saw them talking outside the shop. She looked nervous, kept twisting her apron. He gave her something, a note. Maybe. She tucked it away fast. Miss Marple's needles stopped. Clara, the sweet girl who'd found the lockpick in the rose garden. Was Victor pulling her into his scheme? She thought of a case where a maid had been bribed to look the other way. Clara wasn't like that, but she was young, easily swayed by a smooth talker. We must keep an eye on Clara, Miss Marple said. She sees more than she knows. Sir Henry nodded. Sounds like Victor's our man. But he's clever, Jane. No prints on the lockpick, no brooch in his cottage. If he's the thief, he's covered his tracks. Not all of them, Miss Marple said softly. People always leave something behind. A word, a look, a mistake. We just have to find it. The talk turned to the bazaar, now only a week away. Sir Reginald had agreed to display his remaining jewels, including a new emerald Miss Marple had suggested a fake to tempt the thief. She didn't mention the trap to her guests, not yet, but she planted the idea of Victor's guilt gently, like scattering seeds. Mr. Crane seems very interested in the bazaar, she said. He's offered to help with the jewel display. That's kind, but bold, don't you think? Raymond laughed. Bold, if he's the thief. Think he'll try for another jewel. It's possible, Miss Marple said, her voice light. Greed makes people careless. I remember a man in St. Mary Mead, years ago, who stole a silver tray because he couldn't stop himself. Greed is like that, it pulls you in. Sir Henry's eyes narrowed. You're thinking of a trap, aren't you, Jane? Lure him with the emerald, catch him in the act. Miss Marple smiled, neither confirming nor denying. I'm only thinking we should watch Mr. Crane. He's new, and new people bring new troubles. The evening wore on, the fire burning low. The guests shared more stories, Mrs. Price seeing Victor with a sketchbook, drawing the manor's windows. The vicar noticing his interest in the church silver. Even young Tommy, the butcher's boy, saying Victor had asked him to deliver a package to London, no questions asked. Miss Marple listened, her mind sorting each clue like wool in a basket. Victor was at the centre, but something nagged her. The lockpick left in the garden, the man in the dark coat, the letters from London. Was Victor alone, or was someone pulling his strings? As her guests left, Miss Marple stood at her door, the night air cool on her face. The village was dark, except for a light in Rose Cottage, where Victor lived. She thought of his smile, his quick eyes, his talk of buyers. He was like a cat, stalking a bird. But she was a cat too, and her claws were sharper. The next morning, she walked to the village shop, her basket swinging. The shop was busy, with Mrs. Weatherby buying flour and Miss Hartnell arguing about prices. Miss Marple picked up a jar of marmalade, listening as always. Mrs. Weatherby leaned over, her voice loud. I saw Victor Crane again, near the manor, last night. Carrying that same bag I told you about. Sneaky, if you ask me. Miss Hartnell sniffed. He was at the pub, playing cards. Can't be in two places at once, can he? Miss Marple's ears pricked. 2 places at once. Like the night of the theft, when Victor was seen at 8 and 10. Was he that clever? Or was someone else involved? She thought of Lady Harrow's cousin, Edmund, with his money troubles. She needed to know more about him. She found Clara outside, sweeping the shop steps. The girl looked up, her cheeks pink. Miss Marple, did the lockpick help? It might, Miss Marple said kindly. Clara, have you seen Mr. Crane lately? Raymond said he gave you something. Clara's eyes widened, her broom still. It was just a note, asking me to watch the manor's guests at the bazaar. Said he'd pay me. I didn't take it, Miss Marple, I swear. I tore it up. Miss Marple patted her arm. You did right, dear. But keep that to yourself, and tell me if he asks again. Clara nodded, relieved. Miss Marple walked on, her mind busy. A note. Victor was bold, bribing a maid. But why Clara? Did he know she'd seen the man in the dark coat? Or was he planning something bigger? She thought of a case where a thief had used a servant to spy, thinking no one would notice. But she noticed that afternoon. She visited the manor, where Sir Reginald was pacing the library. Miss Marple, any news? He demanded. The police are useless. That emerald display for the bazaar your idea, wasn't it? Think it'll work? I hope so, she said, her eyes on the empty case. A thief who takes one jewel might want another. We'll see who comes to look. Sir Reginald grunted. Crane's been sniffing around, offering to help. I don't trust him. Nor should you, Miss Marple said, her voice mild. But let him help. Let everyone help. The more eyes, the better. She left the manor, her basket heavier with thoughts, The bazaar was close, and her trap was ready. The fake emerald would shine, and Victor would see it. But she'd watch more than Victor. Clara, Edmund, even the villagers, someone knew more than they said. The pattern was there, half-formed like her scarf. She'd keep knitting, keep watching, until it was clear. As the sun set, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her needles clicking. The village was quiet, but secrets whispered in the dark. Victor Crane was one, but not the only one. She thought of the lockpick, the note, the flashlight. The Tuesday nightclub had given her new threads, and she'd pull them all until the truth came loose. The bazaar would be her chance, and she'd be ready. Chapter 5. A shadowy figure, the morning sun, peeked through the clouds over St. Mary Mead, casting soft shadows on the cobblestone lanes. Miss Jane Marple stood in her garden, snipping dead roses with her shears. Her white hair was tucked under a straw hat, and her blue eyes scanned the village, sharp as ever. Her knitting lay inside, but her mind was busy, weaving clues like threads in a scarf. The theft of Sir Reginald Harrow's sapphire brooch had set the village buzzing, and Victor Crane, the slick art dealer in Rose Cottage, was at the heart of it. Clara, the manor's maid, had seen a man in a dark coat near the rose garden the night of the theft. Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8. A scrap of black wool and a lockpick found in the garden pointed to him, and his talk of debts and London buyers only tightened the knot. But Miss Marple knew a single thread didn't make a pattern. She needed more, and today the village gave her something new. The church bell rang, sharp and urgent, not its usual Sunday chime. Miss Marple set down her shears and walked to the village square, her black shoes tapping steadily. A small crowd had gathered outside St. Mary's Church, a stone building with ivy on its walls and stained glass windows that glowed like jewels. The vicar, Leonard Clement, stood at the door, his face pale, his glasses slipping down his nose. Mrs. Clement was beside him, wringing her hands, and Inspector Craddock was there, his notebook out. "Jane," Mrs. Clement called, spotting her. "It's awful, the silver candelabra stone right from the altar." Miss Marple's heart skipped, but her face stayed calm. "Stolen. When did this happen?" "Last night," Leonard said, his voice shaking. "I locked the church at 9 after evening prayers. This morning, the candelabra was gone. The sacristy window was forced open, and there's a scratch on the lock." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. Another theft, so soon after the brooch. The candelabra was old, heavy silver, not as grand as the sapphire, but valuable enough to tempt a thief. She thought of Victor Crane, who'd lingered by those candlesticks last Sunday, admiring their craftsmanship. Was this his work, or was the village dealing with a bolder criminal? Inspector Craddock waved her over. "Miss Marple, you've got a knack for these things. Care to look?" She followed him into the church, where the air was cool and smelled of wax and polish. The altar was bare without the candelabra, a pair of tall silver pieces that had stood there for 100 years. The sacristy, a small room behind the altar, had a low window with a bent frame. Miss Marple peered at it, noting the scratches, shallow, like the ones at the manor. Outside, the grass was trampled, and a faint footprint showed in the soft earth. Size 10, she thought, like the prints at the manor. Any witnesses? She asked Craddock, her voice soft. "One," he said. "Mrs. Weatherby, bless her nosy soul. She was walking her dog at 10 last night and saw a man near the church. Tall, dark coat, moving fast. Couldn't see his face, but she swears it looked like Victor Crane. Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. A dark coat, again. Victor's coat was black wool, like the scrap on the manor's roses. And 10 o'clock, the same time Clara saw a man at the manor. Was Victor that busy, or was someone copying him? She thought of a case years ago, a thief who'd dressed like another man to throw off suspicion. Anything else? She asked Craddock. Held up a small evidence bag. Another scrap of cloth caught on the window frame. Black wool, like the one at the manor. We're testing it, but it's a match so far. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. 2 thefts, 2 scraps of black wool. It was too neat, almost like a trail left on purpose. She didn't trust neat trails. Victor was clever, but was he careless enough to leave cloth behind twice? Or was someone framing him? She thought of Lady Harrow's cousin, Edmund, with his money troubles, mentioned in passing at the manor. She needed to know more about him. Back outside, the crowd was growing. Mrs. Price, the baker, was whispering to Miss Hartnell, who shook her head. "It's that Crane fellow," Mrs. Price said loudly, "always sneaking about. I saw him near the church yesterday, looking at the windows." Miss Hartnell sniffed. "Nonsense. He was at the pub at 10, playing cards with Dr. Haydock. I saw him myself." Miss Marple listened, her basket swinging, 2 places at once, again, like the night of the brooch theft, when Victor was seen at 8 and 10. Either he was very clever, or someone else was wearing a dark coat. She thought of her Tuesday nightclub gathering, where Raymond had seen Victor acting cagey, and Joan had noticed his flashlight on a late-night walk. And Clara had torn up a note from Victor, asking her to watch the manners. Guests, he was bold, but was he bold enough for 2 thefts? She walked to the vicarage, where Mrs. Clement was making tea, her hands still shaky. "Jane, this is dreadful," she said, pouring a cup. "First the brooch, now the candelabra. What's next? The church plate?" "Let's hope not," Miss Marple said, sipping her tea. "Margaret, tell me about last night. Did you see anyone?" "Near the church?" Mrs. Clement nodded. "I was closing the curtains at 10, and I saw a shadow by the gate. A man, I think, in a dark coat. He was gone before I could look closer. I didn't think much of it then, but now." Miss Marple's heart skipped. Another witness, another dark coat. "Did he look like Mr. Crane?" she asked, her voice gentle. "I couldn't say," Mrs. Clement admitted. "It was too dark. But he's been around the church a lot, hasn't he? Leonard said he was staring at the candlesticks last Sunday." Miss Marple nodded, her mind busy. Victor's interest in the candlesticks, his late-night walks, his debt-sit all pointed to him. But the timing nagged her. How could he be at the pub and the church at 10? She thought of a case where a thief had used a friend to create an alibi, splitting their time like a deck of cards. Was Victor that clever, or was there another player? She left the vicarage and headed to Rose Cottage, where Victor lived. It was a small house with roses climbing the walls, but its windows were dark, the curtains drawn. She didn't knock. Yet, instead, she walked around the back, where a narrow path led to a shed. The grass was trampled, and a faint mark caught her arja smudge of dirt, like from a shoe. She knelt, her knees creaking, and saw it was fresh, with a tread pattern like the manor's footprints. Size 10, she thought. Victor's size. A noise made her look up. Victor stepped out of the shed, his dark coat over his arm, a spade in his hand. He froze when he saw her, then smiled, smooth as butter. "Miss Marple, out for a walk. You caught me gardening, trying to tame these weeds." Miss Marple smiled back, her eyes on the spade. You're a busy man, Mr. Crane, gardening. At this hour? I thought you'd be at the bazaar meeting, helping with the jewel display. His smile flickered, just for a second. I'll be there later, just tidying up here. The bazaar sounds Grand Sir Reginald's emeralds, wasn't it? An emerald, Miss Marple corrected, her voice mild. A new one, he says. Very tempting. For a collector, Victor's eyes lit up, too quick to hide. Tempting, yes. I know a few buyers who'd love it. But I'm just helping with the art stall, not jewels. Of course, Miss Marple said, her smile sweet, but her mind was sharp. He'd jumped at the emerald like a cat at a bird. She thought of the grocer's assistant, whose eyes had gleamed at a silver coin. Victor's eyes gleamed now, and she didn't like it. She said goodbye and walked back to the village, her basket heavy with thoughts. The candelabra theft was bold, too bold for a village like St. Mary Mead. Victor was in the middle. But the scraps of cloth, the footprints, the timing, it was all too neat. She thought of Edmund, Lady Harrow's cousin, who'd visited the manor and had money troubles. Was he tied to Victor, or was he a separate thread? She needed to see them together, watch their faces dot at the village hall. The bazaar plans were in full swing. Dolly Bantry was there, arranging tables, and Raymond West was helping, though he spent more time talking than working. Aunt Jane, he called, heard about the church. Another theft. It's got to be Victor. Not so loud, Raymond, Miss Marple said, glancing around. Victor was there, at the far end, talking to Sir Reginald. His smile was bright, but his hands were restless, twisting a pen. She watched him, noting how he stood close to Sir Reginald, asking about the emerald display. Sir Reginald looked annoyed, waving him off, but Victor kept talking, smooth and persistent. Dolly joined her, whispering, "He's pushy, isn't he? Keeps asking about the jewels. Says he can help with security, but I don't trust him." "Nor should you," Miss Marple said softly, "but let him help. The more he's involved, the more he'll show." She moved closer, pretending to adjust a tablecloth. Victor's voice carried, smooth and low. "Sir Reginald, that emerald sounds stunning. I know people in London who'd pay a fortune. You should let me value it." Sir Reginald grunted. "No need, Crane. It's for display, not sale. And after the brooch, I'm not letting anyone near it." Victor laughed, but his eyes were hard. Miss Marple saw it, like a stitch out of place. He wanted that emerald, or something like it. Her trap was working, pulling him in, but she needed to watch the others, too. Clara was there, setting out cups, her face nervous. Miss Marple caught her eye and smiled, calming her. Clara knew something, and Victor knew she knew. That note he'd given her, was it a bribe or a threat? Back home, Miss Marple sat by her fire, knitting and thinking. The candelabra theft had changed things. 2 thefts, 2 dark coats, 2 scraps of cloth. Victor was the link, but the pattern wasn't clear. Was he stealing for himself or for someone else? She thought of the lockpick, the flashlight, the letters from London, and Edmund with his debts and his art business. The bazaar was coming, and her fake emerald would shine. Victor would reach for it, she was sure, but who else would? She visited Inspector Craddock the next day at the police station, a small room with a desk and a teapot. He was frowning over papers. "Miss Marple, this candelabra business is messy. The cloth matches the manners, and the footprints are the same size. But Victor's alibi holds he was at the pub till 11, says Dr. Haydock." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Alibis can be tricky, Inspector. Like a loose stitch, they look fine until you pull. Have you checked his London connections? We're trying, Craddock said. He's got a partner there, an art dealer named Edmund. Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin, it turns out. He's got debts, too, and a reputation for bending the law. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Edmund Langley, the name from Lady Harrow, now tied to Victor. The pattern was growing, but it was tangled. Keep watching them both, she said. And the bazaar, the emerald will bring them out. Craddock grinned. You're setting a trap, aren't you? I knew it. Just a little bait, Miss Marple said, her smile sweet. But her mind was sharp, like her shears. The candelabra was gone, but it had left a trail. Victor was part of it, and maybe Edmund, too. The bazaar would show her more, and she'd be ready, watching from the shadows. As the sun set, Miss Marple stood in her garden, the roses dark against the dusk. The village was quiet, but secrets whispered in the air. A shadowy figure was out there, stealing silver and sapphires. She'd catch him with her trap and her eyes. Her needles clicked in, her mind, steady and sure, knitting the truth. Chapter 6. The Art of Deception. The afternoon sun bathed St. Mary Mead in a golden glow, softening the edges of the cottages and making the roses in Miss Jane Marple's garden shine like rubies. She stood at her gate, her straw hat tilted against the light, her basket swinging lightly on her arm. Her white hair was neat, her blue eyes sharp as she looked toward Rose Cottage, where Victor Crane lived. The village was still buzzing about the sapphire, brooch stolen from Harrow Manor and the silver candelabra taken from St. Mary's Church. Victor, the slick art dealer with his dark coat and smooth smile, was the name on everyone's lips. Clara, the manor's maid, had seen a shadowy figure in a dark coat the night of the brooch theft. Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8. A scrap of black wool, a lockpick, and now a second theft with matching clues pointed to him. Dolly Bantry had overheard his talk of debts and London buyers, and Inspector Craddock had linked him to Edmund Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin with money troubles. Miss Marple's mind was like her knitting each clue a stitch, forming a pattern. Today she'd pull another thread by visiting Victor himself. She walked down the lane, her black shoes tapping on the stones. Rose Cottage was small, with ivy on its walls and a neat garden that Victor clearly didn't tend. The curtains were half drawn, giving the house a secretive air. Miss Marple had a plant to ask about his art collection, a harmless excuse for an old lady's curiosity. But her eyes would be watching, her ears listening. People always showed their true colours if you gave them a chance. She knocked and Victor opened the door, his smile wide but his eyes wary. Miss Marple, what a surprise. Come to see my roses. She smiled, sweet as sugar. Your roses are lovely, Mr. Crane, but I heard you have quite an art collection. I've always admired a good painting. May I see? His smile flickered, just for a moment, but he stepped aside. Of course, not much, but I'm proud of it. Come in. The cottage was tidy, with polished floors and a faint smell of paint. The parlour was small, its walls covered with paintings, landscapes, portraits, and a few still lifes with bright fruit. A table held art books, a magnifying glass, and a small stack of letters. Miss Marple's eyes darted to them, noting a London postmark on the top one. She thought of Mr. Pye's story, the heavy letter Victor had snatched away. Was it still here? These are beautiful, she said, pausing at a painting of a river, its colours too bright, its lines too perfect. Is this one yours, Victor? nodded, standing close. A copy, I'm afraid. I practice by imitating the masters. That's a Turner, or near enough. Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes sharp. A copy. She knew little about art, but she knew people, and Victor's voice had a tiny catch, like a snag in wool. She thought of a case years ago, a man who'd sold fake silver as real. Was Victor's copy more than practice? She moved to another, painting a portrait of a woman in a blue dress. The signature was smudged, the frame heavy. She brushed her hand along it, feeling a slight give, like a hidden panel. Her heart skipped, but her face stayed calm. "You have a good eye," she said. "This one looks old, valuable, perhaps." Victor laughed, a bit too loud. "Not really, just a trinket I picked up in London. I like the frame more than the painting." Miss Marple nodded, but her mind was busy. The frame's give suggested a secret, maybe a hiding place. She thought of a thief she'd known, who'd hidden stolen coins behind a mirror. Was Victor hiding something behind his art? She moved to a corner, where a small table held a vase of roses. Under it, she glimpsed a metal edge, half hidden by a cloth. A safe, she thought, her pulse quickening. Small, but sturdy, built into the wall. Victor followed her gaze, his smile tightening. "Care for tea?" he asked, stepping in front of the table. "I've got a nice blend from London." "That's kind," Miss Marple said, "but I won't stay long. I'm curious, though you must know a lot about jewels, too, being in the art trade, like Sir Reginald's sapphire brooch." Victor's eyes flicked, like a cat spotting a bird. "I know a bit. The brooch was a beauty, wasn't it? Shame. It's gone, but jewels aren't my line." "Too risky." "Risky, yes," Miss Marple said, her voice soft, "but tempting for some, like that emerald Sir Reginald's showing at the bazaar. I hear it's stunning." His smile returned, too quick. "An emerald?" "I hadn't heard. I'm helping with the art stall, not jewels. But I'll take a look. Sounds like a treat." Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. He'd taken the bait, just as she'd hoped. Her fake emerald, suggested to Sir Reginald for the bazaar, was pulling him in. But the safe, the painting, the letters, they were new threads, and she needed to pull them. "You must have buyers." "Who'd love it?" she said, watching his face. "In London, perhaps." Victor's laugh was smooth, but his hands twitched. "Oh, I know a few. But I'm staying in St. Mary Mead for now. Quieter life." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her smile sweet. But her eyes saw everything, the twitch, the glance at the safe, the way he stood between her and the table. He was hiding something, and she'd find it. She thanked him and left, the cottage door closing softly behind her. The lane was quiet, but her mind was loud. A safe, a forged painting, a letter from London. Victor wasn't just a thief, he was a master of deception, like a fox weaving through traps. But foxes left tracks, and she'd found his. She thought of the grocer's assistant, whose fake coins had fooled everyone until she'd weighed them. Victor's art was fake too, or some of it. And that safe, what did it hold? The brooch, the candelabra, or something else? Back in the village, she stopped at the shop, where Mrs. Price was stacking loaves. Miss Marple heard about the candelabra. She said, her voice loud, "It's that Crane fellow, mark my words. I saw him near the church again, carrying a bag." Miss Marple nodded, buying a loaf. "When was this, Mrs. Price?" "2 nights ago," she said. "Late, maybe 9. He was hurrying, looked guilty to me. Miss Marple's heart skipped. 9 o'clock, before the candelabra theft. But Mrs. Hartnell had seen him at the pub at 10, when Mrs. Weatherby saw a man in a dark coat at the church. The timing was tight, too tight. Was Victor that fast, or was someone else wearing his coat? She thought of Edmund Langley, the art dealer with debts, linked to Victor by Inspector Craddock. Was he here, in St. Mary Mead, pulling strings? She walked to the vicarage, where Mrs. Clement was watering her flowers. "Jane, you look deep in thought," she said. "Is it the thefts?" "It is," Miss Marple said, sitting on a bench. "Margaret, have you heard of Edmund Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin?" Mrs. Clement's eyes widened. "Oh yes, he visited the manor last month. Charming, but a bit shady. Always talking about his art deals, but Leonard said he seemed desperate." "Why, just curious," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. But her mind was sharp. Edmund, desperate, tied to Victor, to art dealers, both in debt. She thought of a case where 2 men had worked together, one stealing, the other selling. Was that the pattern here? That evening she met Inspector Craddock at the police station, a small room with a kettle steaming. He was sorting reports, his face tired. "Miss Marple, we've got nothing new. The cloth from the church matches the manors, and the lockpicks clean no prints. But Victor's alibi for the candelabra is shaky. Dr. Haydock says he left the pub at 10, not 11. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. 10, that's interesting. And he's safe any luck? Craddock shook his head. No warrant yet, but we're watching him. He's been asking about the bazaar, especially the emerald. Says he wants to help with security, does he? Miss Marple said, her smile faint. Security, a perfect excuse to get close to the jewel. Her trap was working, pulling. Victor in, but Edmund nagged at her. "What about Mr. Langley?" she asked. "We're checking," Craddock said. "He's in London, but he's been calling Victor. We traced a call to Rose Cottage last week, and he visited St. Mary Mead a month ago, just before Victor arrived." Miss Marple nodded, her mind busy. A call, a visit. The threads were coming together, but the pattern wasn't clear. Victor was the fox, but was Edmund the hunter? Or were they both foxes, working together? She thought of Clara's note, Victor's bribe. He was bold, but desperate men took risks. The next day, she saw Clara at the village hall, setting up for the bazaar. The girl looked pale, her hands twisting her apron. "Miss Marple," she whispered, "Victor spoke to me again. Asked if I'd seen anyone odd at the manor. I didn't tell him about the lockpick, I swear." "You're a good girl," Miss Marple said, patting her arm. "Did he say anything else?" Clara hesitated. "He asked about the emerald. Said, it must be worth a lot. His eyes were greedy." Miss Marple's heart skipped. Greedy, like the grocer's assistant, counting coins in the dark. Victor was circling her trap, and she'd make sure he fell in. But she'd watch Edmund, too, and Clara. The bazaar was close, and the truth was closer. As the sun set, Miss Marple sat by her fire, knitting her scarf. The village was quiet, but secrets rustled like leaves. A forged painting, a hidden safe, a desperate cousin. Victor was deep in this, but he wasn't alone. Her needles clicked, steady and sure, as the pattern grew clearer. The emerald would shine, and the thief would reach. She'd be waiting, her trap ready. Chapter 7. A Trap in Motion. The morning mist draped St. Mary Mead like a soft shawl. Curling around the cottages, and muting the chirp of birds. Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlour, her knitting needles clicking as she worked on a pink scarf. Her white hair was neat under a laced cap, and her blue eyes were sharp, piecing together the puzzle of the stolen sapphire brooch and the church's silver candelabra. Victor Crane, the art dealer in Rose Cottage, was the village's prime suspect, with his slick smile and dark coat. Clara, the manor's maid, had seen a shadowy figure near the rose garden the night of the brooch theft. Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8. Scraps of black wool, a lockpick, and Victor's talk of debts and London buyers tightened the net around him. Miss Marple's visit to his cottage had revealed a hidden safe and a forged painting, and Inspector Craddock had linked him to Edmund Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin, with money troubles. The village buzzed with gossip, but Miss Marple's mind was quiet, weaving clues like threads in her knitting. Today she'd take a step forward, setting a trap to catch a thief. She walked to the police station, a small brick building with a kettle steaming on a desk. Inspector Craddock was there, his square jaw set as he sorted papers. He looked up, his eyes brightening. "Miss Marple, good to see you. Any new thoughts on our thief?" Miss Marple settled into a chair, her basket on her lap. "A few, Inspector. Victor Crane is on my mind. His safe, his painting, his questions about jewels, they add up. But we need proof, not guesses." Craddock nodded, leaning back. "We're watching him. His alibi for the candelabra is weak. Dr. Haydock says he left the pub at 10, not 11. And that lockpick you found, it's old but professional. Fits a man like Victor with his art dealer tricks." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "He's clever, but clever people slip. I've been thinking about the bazaar. Sir Reginald's jewel display, with that new emerald, it's tempting, don't you think? For a thief, I mean." Craddock's brow raised. "You're planning something. Aren't you a trap?" She smiled, her voice soft. "A little bait, perhaps. If we make the emerald shine, our thief might reach for it. Victor's already asking about it, hasn't he?" "He has," Craddock said. "Told Sir Reginald he could help with security. Bold, if he's our man. Very bold," Miss Marple said, like a fox sniffing a hen house. "I suggest we let him help, but watch him close. The emerald isn't real, of course, Sir Reginald knows that, but a thief won't." Craddock grinned. "A fake jewel to catch a real thief. I like it. How do we set it up?" Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. "Announce the emerald at the bazaar, make it public, say it's rare, valuable, locked in a case like the brooch. Victor will hear, and he'll come. We need men hidden, watching the display. If he tries for it, we'll have him." Scribbled notes, his face eager. "We'll need Sir Reginald's help, and the bazaar committee, Mrs. Bantry, the vicar. Can we trust them to keep quiet?" "Trust Dolly to talk," Miss Marple said, "but that's what we want. Gossip will draw Victor in. Just make sure the police are ready, out of sight." Craddock nodded. "I'll set it up. We've got a week till the bazaar. Anything else, miss?" Marple hesitated, her mind on Edmund Langley. "Keep an eye on Mr. Langley too. He's in London, but he's tied to Victor. A call, a visit, debts they're linked. We don't want to miss a thread." "Got it," Craddock said. "Langley's on our list. We're checking his calls, his visits. If he's in this, we'll find out." Miss Marple left the station, her basket swinging. The trap was taking shape, like a pattern in her knitting. The fake emerald would gleam, and Victor would pounce, she was sure of it. But Edmund nagged at her, a loose stitch in the pattern. Was he the mastermind, or just another pawn? She thought of a case years ago, a theft where two men had worked together, one stealing, the other selling. Victor and Edmund fit that mold, but she needed proof. She walked to the village hall, where the bazaar plans were buzzing. Tables were piled with jam jars, knitted socks, and handmade cards. Dolly Bantry was there, her laugh loud as she arranged flowers. "Jane, come to help, or are you chasing that thief?" "A bit of both," Miss Marple said, smiling. "Dolly, have you told anyone about the emerald?" Dolly's eyes widened. "Not yet, but it's exciting, isn't it? Sir Reginald's showing it at the bazaar, locked tight. Everyone's talking about it already." Miss Marple nodded. That was good gossip. Was her ally. "Has Mr. Crane heard?" "Oh yes," Dolly said. "He was here yesterday, asking about the display. Said he knows how to keep jewels safe." "I didn't like his smile, Jane. Too smooth." Miss Marple's heart skipped. Victor was circling. Just as she'd hoped. Let him talk, Dolly. The more he knows, the better. She moved through the hall, helping with a tablecloth, but watching everyone. Clara was there, setting out cups, her face pale. Miss Marple caught her eye, nodding gently. Clara had torn up Victor's note, but his bribe attempt worried her. Was he trying to use her or silence her? She thought of a maid in a past case, bribed to leave a window open. Clara was honest but young, and Victor was clever. Outside, she saw Victor himself, talking to Raymond West near the green. Raymond was gesturing, his voice loud, while Victor's smile was calm, his hands in his pockets. Miss Marple moved closer, pretending to admire a rosebush. "Aunt Jane," Raymond called. "Victor's offering to paint a sign for the bazaar. Thinks it'll draw a crowd." "How kind," Miss Marple said, her eyes on Victor. His coat was off, but his shoes had that same dirt smudge she'd seen at his cottage. "Garden dirt, like the manners. You're very helpful, Mr. Crane, and so interested in the emerald, I hear." Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes flicked. "Just curious, Miss Marple. A rare gem's exciting even for an art man like me, of course," she said, her voice sweet. But her mind was sharp. He was too eager, like a cat eyeing a bird. She thought of the grocer's assistant, whose greed had shown in his hands, always reaching. Victor's hands were still, but his eyes betrayed him. Raymond pulled her aside, whispering, "He's up to something, Aunt Jane. Kept asking about the emerald's case, the locks, the guards. Says it's for safety, but I don't buy it." "Nor do I," Miss Marple said. "But let him ask. The more he shows, the more we learn." That afternoon, she visited Harrow Manor, where Sir Reginald was pacing the library. The empty case where the brooch had sat was a sore spot, and he glared at it. "Miss Marple, this emerald plan of yours, think it'll work? I'm sick of thieves in my house." "I hope so," she said, her eyes on the window. The rose garden outside was quiet, but she remembered the lockpick, the trampled soil. Victor's offered to help with security. What do you think? Sir Reginald snorted. "I don't trust him an inch. But if he's the thief, let him come. I'll have men watching." "Good," Miss Marple said. "Make the emerald shine, Sir Reginald. Announce it everywhere. A thief won't resist." She left the manor, her mind busy. The trap was set, but she needed to watch more than Victor. Clara was nervous, Edmund was a shadow in the background, and the village was full of eyes. She thought of Mrs. Weatherby's story, a man in a dark coat at the church, 10 o'clock. Victor's alibi was shaky, but the timing was tight. Was he working with someone, or was someone framing him? At the village shop, Mrs. Price was gossiping with Miss Hartnell. "I saw Victor with a man yesterday," Mrs. Price said, her voice loud, "near his cottage, late. Not from here, fancy suit, like a city type." Miss Marple's ears pricked. "A man, did you hear his name?" "No," Mrs. Price said. "But he looked like Victor, same sly smile. They were arguing, I think." Miss Marple nodded, buying a tin of biscuits. A city type, arguing with Victor. Edmund, perhaps. She thought of a case where two thieves had fallen out, one betraying the other. Was that happening here? She needed to see this man, or find him. She found Clara outside, sweeping the steps. The girl looked up, her cheeks pink. "Miss Marple, I heard something." Victor was at the hall, talking to a man on the phone. He said Edmund and something about a buyer. I didn't catch it all, but he sounded angry. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Edmund, the name kept coming up, like a stubborn knot. "You're doing well, Clara," she said. "Keep listening, but be careful." Clara nodded, her broom trembling. Miss Marple walked on, her basket heavy with thoughts. Victor and Edmund, tied by phone calls, debts, and art. The bazaar was days away, and her trap was ready. The emerald would gleam, and someone would reach. She'd watch them all, Victor, Edmund, even Clara. The pattern was forming, and she'd pulled the final thread. As the sun set, Miss Marple sat by her fire, knitting and thinking. The village was quiet, but secrets rustled like leaves. A fake emerald, a hidden safe, a shadowy. Cousin Victor was the fox, but was he the only one? Her needles clicked, steady and sure, as the trap closed in. Chapter 8. The village bazaar. The sun shone brightly over St. Mary Mead, painting the village green with golden light. The annual bazaar was in full swing, with stalls lining the square, their tables piled high with jam jars, knitted scarves, and fresh-baked pies. Laughter and chatter filled the air, mingled with the scent of roses and warm bread. Children ran between the booths, clutching balloons, while the church choir sang softly in the background. Miss Jane Marple stood at the tea stall, her straw hat tilted against the sun, her white hair neat under a laced cap. Her blue eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the crowd, missing nothing. Her basket sat at her feet, holding her knitting, but her mind was busy, weaving the clues of the stolen sapphire brooch and the church's silver candelabra into a pattern. Victor Crane, the art dealer with his slick smile and dark coat, was the village's prime suspect. Clara, the manor's maid, had seen a shadowy figure near the rose garden the night of the brooch theft. Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8. Scraps of black wool, a lockpick, and Victor's talk of debts and London buyers pointed to him. Miss Marple's visit to his cottage had revealed a hidden safe and a forged painting, and Inspector Craddock had linked him to Edmund Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin with money troubles. Clara had overheard Victor mention Edmund on a phone call, and Mrs. Price had seen him arguing with a city man. The bazaar was Miss Marple's chance to set her trapper, fake emerald, announced as a rare gem, displayed in a locked case to tempt the thief. Victor had taken the bait, offering to help with security, and Miss Marple was ready to watch him pounce. The jewel stall stood at the centre of the green, its glass case gleaming under a canopy. The fake emerald, a bright green stone in a silver setting, sparkled like a star, drawing gasps from the villagers. Sir Reginald Harrow stood beside it, his moustache twitching with pride, though he knew the gem was a fake. Inspector Craddock's men, dressed as villagers, lingered nearby, their eyes hidden under hats. Miss Marple poured tea at her stall, her hands steady but her gaze sharp. Victor was there, moving through the crowd, his dark coat swapped for a light jacket. But his smile was the same smooth, like a cat stalking a bird. Dolly Bantry bustled over, her cheeks pink with excitement. "Jane, isn't it grand? The emeralds, the talk of the bazaar. Everyone's looking, especially Victor. He's been by the stall 3 times already." Miss Marple nodded, handing Dolly a cup. "Has he, now? What did he say?" "Said it's a fine gem," Dolly whispered. "Asked Sir Reginald about the lock, the guards, everything. Said he could get a buyer in London. Bold, if he's the thief." "Very bold," Miss Marple said, her eyes on Victor. He was talking to Sir Reginald, his hands gesturing, his smile wide, but his eyes kept flicking to the case, quick and greedy. She thought of a grocer's assistant years ago, whose eyes had gleamed at a silver coin. Victor's eyes gleamed now, and she didn't trust them. She moved closer, pretending to adjust a tray of scones. Victor's voice carried, smooth and low. "Sir Reginald, that emerald's a treasure. You should let me value it. I know people who'd pay a fortune." Sir Reginald grunted, his face red. "Not for sale, Crane, and after the brooch, I'm not taking chances. The case is locked, and I've got eyes on it." Victor laughed, but his smile was tight. "Wise move. Thieves are clever these days." Miss Marple's heart skipped. Clever, yes, like a fox sniffing a trap. She watched Victor wander to the art stall where his paintings hung, bright and perfect. Too perfect, she thought, remembering the forged painting in his cottage. Was he selling fakes or hiding something else? She needed to keep him in sight. Clara was at the tea stall, her hands trembling as she poured. Miss Marple touched her arm, her voice soft. "Clara, dear, you're doing fine. Have you seen Mr. Crane today?" Clara nodded, her cheeks pale. "He was by the jewel stall. Miss Marple asked me if I'd be near it tonight during the dance. Said he needed someone to watch the crowd. I didn't like his look." Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. The dance, tonight, when the bazaar turned festive with music and lanterns. A perfect time for a thief to strike, when eyes were distracted. "You did right to tell me," she said. "Stay near the stall, but don't promise him anything, and come to me if he says more." Clara nodded, her eyes wide. Miss Marple watched her go, her mind busy. Victor was planning something, and Clara was part of it, whether she knew it or not. She thought of a case where a thief had used a servant to distract the guards. Was Victor that cunning, or was someone guiding him? Edmund Langley's name lingered in her mind. Like a stubborn knot, she saw Raymond West across the green, helping Joan hang bunting. He waved, his grin wide. "Aunt Jane, this bazaar's a hit. Think your thief will show." "I expect so," Miss Marple said, smiling. "Raymond, have you seen anyone new today? Someone from out of town, perhaps?" Raymond thought, scratching his head. There was a man earlier, near Victor's store. City type, fancy suit. Looked like he knew Victor. They were talking close, like old friends. Didn't catch his name, but he had a scar on his cheek. Miss Marple's heart skipped. A city man, like Mrs. Price had seen arguing with Victor, Edmund, or another player. "Keep an eye out, Raymond," she said, "and tell me if you see him again." The bazaar hummed along, with villagers buying cakes and playing games. Miss Marple stayed at her stall, pouring tea and listening. Mrs. Weatherby stopped by, her voice loud. I saw Victor poking around the jewel case again. He's up to no good, mark my words. Miss Hartnell, sharp as a pin, disagreed. He's been at the art stall all day. Can't steal if he's busy, can he? Miss Marple smiled, handing them cups. 2 stories, as always. Victor was everywhere, yet nowhere. She thought of a case where a thief had used a crowd to hide his moves, slipping in and out like a shadow. Was Victor that clever, or was the city man his partner? As the sun dipped low, the bazaar prepared for the evening dance. Lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow, and a band set up on the green. The jewel stalls stayed open, the emerald gleaming under the lights. Sir Reginald stood guard, his eyes fierce, while Craddock's men blended into the crowd. Miss Marple moved to a bench, her knitting in her lap, her eyes on the case. Victor was nearby, chatting with Dr. Haydock, but his gaze kept drifting to the emerald. She saw it, like a stitch out of place. Dolly joined her, whispering Jane, he's circling. Like a vulture. Think he'll try tonight. Perhaps, Miss Marple said, her needles clicking. But we're ready. The police are watching, and so am I. The dance began, with couples twirling to a lively tune. Miss Marple stayed still, her eyes sweeping. The crowd. Clara was near the jewel stall, serving tea, her face nervous. Victor moved closer, offering her a smile, then leaned toward the case, his hand brushing the lock. Miss Marple's heart raced, but she stayed calm. Was this his move, or a test? She thought of the grocer's assistant, who'd touched a coin before stealing it, checking if anyone noticed. Victor was checking, to dot suddenly, a man appeared. At the edge of the green, his suit dark, his face half hidden by a hat. A scar gleamed on his cheek in the lantern light. Miss Marple's breath caught. The city man, from Raymond's story. He nodded to Victor, a quick, sharp gesture, then vanished into the crowd. Victor's smile faded, his hand dropping from the case. He glanced around, his eyes meeting Miss Marple's for a split second. She smiled back, sweet as sugar, but her mind was sharp. A signal, a partner. The pattern was growing. She signaled Craddock, who was nearby, dressed as a farmer. Inspector, she whispered, did you see that man? Scar on his cheek, city suit. He's with Victor. Craddock nodded, his face grim. Saw him. We'll follow. Stay here, Miss Marple. She stayed, but her eyes followed Victor. He moved. Through the dance, laughing, but his steps were quick, his hands restless. Clara came to her, whispering, he asked me to watch the stall again, said he'd pay me. I said no, Miss Marple, I swear. You're a good girl, Miss Marple, said, patting her arm. Stay close to Sir Reginald tonight. Don't let Victor near you alone. The dance went on, the music bright, but the air felt heavy, like a storm brewing. Miss Marple watched the jewel case, the emerald glowing like a lure. Victor was back, talking to Sir Reginald, his voice smooth. Fine setup you've got, he said. That lock's sturdy, isn't it? Sir Reginald grunted. Sturdy enough, and I've got men watching Crane. No thieves getting near it. Victor smiled, but his eyes were hard. Miss Marple saw it, like a snag in wool. He was testing, probing, waiting. Her trap was working, but the city man worried her. Was he Edmund or someone else? She needed to know. As the night deepened, the crowd thinned, but the jewel stall stayed. Lit. Miss Marple moved to a shadowy corner, her knitting forgotten. Victor was still there, now helping stack chairs, but his eyes never left the case. Craddock's men were close, their faces hidden. Clara stayed by Sir Reginald, her hands trembling. The band played its last song, and the lanterns flickered. Miss Marple's heart beat steady, her eyes sharp. The trap was set, and the thief was near. But who was the man with the scar? And what was Victor waiting for? She thought of a case where a thief had waited for the perfect moment, striking when the crowd was distracted. The dance was that moment, but Victor hadn't moved. Was he waiting for his partner, or playing a deeper game? She remembered the safe in his cottage, the forged painting, the phone call with Edmund. The pattern was there, half-formed, like her scarf. The bazaar wasn't over, and neither was her trap. As the clock struck 10, Miss Marple stood, her basket on her arm. The village was quiet now, the lanterns dim. Victor was gone, slipped into the night, but she felt his presence, like a fox. In the shadows, her trap was ready, and the emerald would shine again tomorrow. She'd watch, and she'd wait. The thief would come, and she'd be there. Chapter 9. A dangerous game. The morning air in St. Mary Mead was crisp, with a hint of autumn brushing the leaves of the village green. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy parlour, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on a pink scarf. Her white hair was tucked neatly under a laced cap, and her blue eyes, sharp as ever, flickered toward the window where the cottages of St. Mary Mead stood quiet under a grey sky. The village was still reeling from the theft of Sir Reginald Harrow's sapphire brooch and the church's silver candelabra, and Victor Crane, the art dealer in Rose Cottage, was at the heart of every whisper. Clara, the manor's maid, had seen a shadowy figure in a dark coat the night of the brooch theft. Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8. Scraps of black wool, a lockpick, and Victor's talk of debts and London buyers pointed to him, while Miss Marple's visit to his cottage revealed a hidden safe and a forged painting. Inspector Craddock had linked him to Edmund Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin with money troubles, and Clara had overheard Victor mention Edmund in a heated phone call. At the bazaar, Victor's eyes had locked on the fake emerald, part of Miss Marple's trap, and a mysterious city man with a scar had signalled him. Today, a new thread would tighten the pattern, and Miss Marple was ready to pull it. A soft knock came at her door, and Clara stood there, her face pale, her hands twisting her apron. The girl's brown eyes were wide with worry, and her cheeks flushed pink as she stepped inside. "Miss Marple, I need to talk," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "It's about Mr. Crane. He's scaring me." Miss Marple set her knitting down, her voice gentle. "Come in, dear. Sit by the fire and tell me everything. You're safe here." Clara perched on a chair, her hands trembling. The parlour was warm, with a teapot steaming and the scent of lavender from a bowl on the table. Miss Marple poured her a cup, her eyes kind but sharp, like a needle threading wool. "Now, Clara," she said, "what's Mr. Crane done?" Clara took a shaky breath. "Yesterday, at the bazaar, he found me by the tea stall. He was all smiles, like always, but his eyes were hard. He said he'd pay me £10 to watch Sir Reginald's household. Said he needed to know who comes and goes, especially at night. He told me to keep it secret, not even tell Lady Harrow." Miss Marple's heart skipped, but her face stayed calm. £10 was a fortune for a maid like Clara, enough to tempt anyone. She thought of a case years ago, a servant bribed to leave a door unlocked for a thief. Victor was bold but desperate, and desperation made mistakes. "Did you take the money, dear?" she asked, her voice soft. Clara shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. No, Miss Marple, I swear. I said I'd think about it, but I didn't mean it. I tore up his note before, and I don't trust him. He's not right. The way he looks at me, like he knows I saw that man in the garden. Miss Marple nodded, patting Clara's hand. The man in the dark coat, seen near the manor's rose garden the night of the brooch theft. Clara's story had started this puzzle, and now Victor was pulling her in. Was he trying to use her or silence her? She thought of the grocer's assistant, whose charm had hidden a scheming heart. Victor's charm was the same, but his eyes betrayed him. You did well to tell me, she said. What else did he say? Clara sipped her tea, her voice steadier. He asked about the emerald, the one at the bazaar. Wanted to know if Sir Reginald keeps other jewels at the manor. I said I didn't know, but Cintra told me later he asked her, too. Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. Cintra, the manor's cook, was a sturdy woman, not easily swayed. If Victor was asking her, he was casting a wide net. And what did Cintra say? Miss Marple asked. She told him to mind his own business, Clara said, a small smile breaking through. But he laughed, like it was a joke. Then he said, something odd about a friend in London who'd make us all rich if we helped. I didn't like it, Miss Marple. It felt wrong. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. A friend in London. Edmund Langley, no doubt, the art dealer with debts, linked to Victor by phone calls and a visit to St. Mary Mead. She thought of a case where two men had worked together, one charming the locals, the other pulling strings from afar. Was Victor the front and Edmund the mind? You're a brave girl, Clara, she said. Now, listen carefully. I think we can use this. Will you help me? Clara's eyes widened. Help? How? Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice low. Tell Mr. Crane you'll watch the manor, but don't take his money. Say you're curious, that you want to know more. Tell him what he wants to hear, but come to me with everything he says. Can you do that? Clara hesitated, her hands twisting. It's dangerous, isn't it? What if he finds out? He won't, Miss Marple said, her smile warm but firm. You're smarter than he thinks, and I'll be watching. So will Inspector Craddock. We're setting a trap, Clara, and you're part of it. Clara nodded, her face set. I'll do it, Miss Marple, for Sir Reginald and the village. Miss Marple patted her arm, her mind racing. Clara was the key now, Thread Victor didn't expect. Her trap at the bazaar, with the fake emerald, was already pulling him in, but Clara could draw him closer. She thought of a thief she'd known, caught because a servant played along, feeding him lies until he tripped. Victor was cunning, but cunning men fell hardest. Clara left, her steps lighter, and Miss Marple walked to the village green, where the bazaar was still bustling. The jewel stall stood proud, the fake emerald gleaming in its locked case. Sir Reginald was there, his moustache bristling as he greeted villagers. Inspector Craddock's men, dressed as farmers, lingered nearby, their eyes hidden under hats. Miss Marple took her place at the tea stall, pouring cups and watching the crowd. Victor was there, moving between stalls, his light jacket swapped for his dark coat again. His smile was bright, but his eyes kept darting to the emerald, like a moth to a flame dot. Dolly Bantry bustled over, her cheeks pink. Jane, the emerald's a hit. Everyone's talking about it. Victor's been by again, asking Sir Reginald about the lock. Says he knows a trick to make it safer. Miss Marple's heart skipped. A trick. like the lockpick in the garden or the forged painting in his cottage. Did Sir Reginald agree? She asked, handing Dolly a cup. No, Dolly said. He told Victor to stay away from the case. But Victor just laughed, said he'd help with the art stall instead. I don't trust him, Jane. He's too smooth. Too smooth is right, Miss Marple said, her eyes on Victor. He was talking to Raymond. West now, his hands gesturing, his smile wide. But his gaze flicked to the jewel store, quick and greedy. She thought of the grocer's assistant, whose hands had twitched before he stole. Victor's hands were still, but his eyes betrayed him. She moved closer, pretending to adjust a tray of scones. Victor's voice carried, low and smooth. Raymond, that emerald's a beauty. I know a man in London who'd pay a fortune. Ever think of selling your aunt's old jewelry? Raymond laughed, shaking his head. Aunt Jane's got no jewels, just knitting needles. But you're keen on that emerald, aren't you? Victor's smile tightened. Just curious. It's rare, you know, a collector's dream. Miss Marple's needles would have clicked. A collector's dream, like the sapphire brooch or the silver candelabra. Victor was circling her trap, and Clara's news made it tighter. She saw Clara across the green, serving tea near the jewel stall. The girl caught her eye, nodding slightly. Victor was nearby, watching her, his smile gone. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. He was testing Clara, just as she was testing him. She walked to the manor where Sir Reginald was, checking the bazaar plans. The library was quiet, the empty case a reminder of the stolen brooch. Miss Marple, he said, his voice gruff, this emerald trap of yours, think it'll work? Victor's sniffing around like a dog. I hope so, she said, her eyes on the window. The rose garden outside was still, but she remembered the lockpick, the trampled soil. He's bold, Sir Reginald. Let him come close. The police are ready, Sir Reginald nodded, his face set. I've got extra men tonight for the dance. If he tries anything, we'll have him. Miss Marple smiled, but her mind was busy. The dance tonight was the perfect moment for a thief lights low, crowd distracted. Victor had asked Clara to watch the manor, but his eyes were on the emerald. Was he planning a double move, or was someone else involved? She thought of the city man with the scar, seen at the bazaar, signalling Victor, Edmund Langley, perhaps, or another player. The pattern was forming, but it was tangled. Back at the bazaar, she saw Raymond and Joan hanging lanterns for the dance. Raymond waved, his grin wide. Aunt Jane, Victor's been asking about the manor's locks again. Thinks he's clever, doesn't he? Very clever, Miss Marple said, her voice mild. But cleverness trips itself. Have you seen that city man again, with the scar? Raymond shook his head. Not today. But Victor was on the phone earlier, outside the hall. Sounded angry, kept saying, Edmund, you promised. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Edmund, again. The phone call Clara had overheard, now confirmed. Victor and Edmund were linked, and the bazaar was their stage. She thought of a case where two thieves had split their work, one stealing, the other selling. Was that the game here? She found Inspector Craddock near the jewel stall, his hat low. Miss Marple was set for tonight, he said. Men in place, case locked tight. Victor's been by for times, checking the crowd. Think he'll move. Perhaps, she said, her eyes on Victor, now helping with chairs. But watch for a man with a scar, city type. He's part of this, I'm sure. Craddock nodded, his face grim. We'll watch and Clara, she's nervous. Says Victor spoke to her again, asked if she'd changed her mind. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. She's with us, Inspector. Tell your men to keep her safe. She's playing a dangerous game, but a brave one. As the sun set, the bazaar turned festive, with lanterns glowing and music starting. The emerald shone in its case, a lure for a thief. Miss Marple took her place at a bench, her knitting in her lap, her eyes sweeping the crowd. Victor was there, moving smoothly, his smile back. Clara was near the stall, serving tea, her face pale but set. The city man hadn't reappeared, but Miss Marple felt his shadow. The dance began, couples twirling, and the air grew heavy, like a storm waiting to break. She thought of the grocer's assistant, caught because he'd trusted the wrong person. Victor was trusting Clara, and that was his mistake. Her trap was closing, the emerald gleaming, the police ready. But Edmund, or the man with the scar, was out there, and she needed to see him. The pattern was almost clear, and the bazaar's final night would show her the truth. Her needles clicked in her mind, steady and sure, as the village danced and the thief waited. Chapter 10. The trap snaps shut. The lanterns of St. Mary Mead's bazaar cast a warm glow over the village green, turning the night into a dance of light and shadow. The air was alive with music, laughter, and the clink of teacups as couples twirled to the band's lively tune. Miss Jane Marple sat on a bench near the jewel stall, her straw hat resting beside her, her white hair neat under a lace cap. Her blue eyes, sharp as knitting needles, swept the crowd, missing nothing. Her basket lay at her feet, holding her pink scarf, but her mind was weaving a tighter pattern, the final threads of the mystery, surrounding the stolen sapphire brooch and the church's silver candelabra. Victor Crane, the art dealer with his slick smile and dark coat, was the village's prime suspect. Clara, the manners maid, had seen a shadowy figure near the rose garden the night of the brooch theft. Jenkins, the gardener, had spotted Victor near the manor at 8. Scraps of black wool, a lockpick, a forged painting, and Victor's talk of debts and London buyers pointed to him. Inspector Craddock had linked him to Edmund Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin, and Clara had overheard. Victor mentioned Edmund in a heated call. At the bazaar, Victor's eyes had locked on the fake emerald. Miss Marple's trap and a mysterious city man with a scar had signaled him. Clara's role, pretending to spy for Victor, had drawn him closer. Tonight, the trap would snap shut, and Miss Marple was ready. The jewel stall stood at the heart of the green, its glass case gleaming under the lanterns. The fake emerald, a bright green stone in a silver setting, sparkled like a lure, drawing whispers from the crowd. Sir Reginald Harrow stood nearby, his moustache bristling, his eyes fierce as he guarded the case. Inspector Craddock's men, dressed as villagers, blended into the dancers, their hats low. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her hand steady but her gaze sharp. Victor was there, moving through the crowd, his dark coat back on, his smile smooth but his eyes restless. Clara was at the tea stall, her face pale, serving cups with trembling hands. Miss Marple had told her to play along with Victor's bribe, to watch the manor and report to him, but to tell her everything. The girl was brave but nervous, and Miss Marple kept her in sight. Dolly Bantry bustled over, her cheeks pink from dancing. "Jane, it's a grand night, but that emerald's stealing the show. Victor's been by again, asking Sir Reginald about the lock. Says he's worried about thieves. Cheeky if he's one." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on Victor. He was talking. To Raymond West now, his hands gesturing, his smile wide, but his gaze flicked to the jewel case, quick and greedy, like a cat eyeing a bird. "What did he say, Dolly?" she asked, her voice soft. "Said the lock's too simple," Dolly whispered. "Told Sir Reginald he knows a better one, used in London galleries." Sir Reginald told him to mind his own business, but Victor just laughed. Miss Marple's heart skipped. A better lock. Like the lockpick in the garden, or the forged painting in his cottage. Victor was probing, testing, and her trap was pulling him in. She thought of a grocer's assistant years ago, caught, because he'd touched a coin before stealing it. Victor was touching the case with his words, checking if anyone noticed. She did. She moved closer to the stall, pretending to adjust a tray of scones. Victor's voice carried, low and smooth. "Sir Reginald, that emerald's a prize. You're sure? It's safe. I could check the case, just to be certain." Sir Reginald grunted, his face red. "It's safe, Crane, locked tight, and I've got men watching. No thieves getting near it." Victor's smile tightened, his eyes hard. "Good to know. Wouldn't want another loss, like the brooch." Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. Another loss. Victor's words were bold, almost taunting. She saw Clara nearby, pouring tea, her eyes darting to Victor. The girl caught Miss Marple's gaze and nodded slightly, a signal she'd spoken to him. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. Clara was playing her part, feeding Victor lies about the manor's guests. But his eyes on the emerald told her he was planning more than spying. The band struck up a waltz, and the crowd thickened, couples spinning under. The lanterns. Miss Marple returned to her bench, her knitting in her lap, her eyes sweeping the green. Victor moved to the art stall, rearranging his paintings, but his gaze kept drifting to the jewel case. Clara stayed close to the stall, her apron twisted. In her hands, Sir Reginald stood like a guard dog, his eyes fierce. Craddock's men were invisible, but Miss Marple felt their presence, like threads in her pattern. Raymond West joined her, his grin wide. "Aunt Jane, this is better than a novel." Victor's circling like a shark. "Think he'll try tonight?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her needles clicking. "But he's not alone, Raymond. Have you seen that city man again, with the scar?" Raymond shook his head. "Not since last night. But Victor was on the phone this morning, outside the hall, sounded angry, kept saying, 'Edmund, it's now or never.'" Miss Marple's heart skipped. Edmund Langley, again. The art dealer with debts, linked to Victor by calls and a visit to St. Mary Mead. Clara had overheard his name, and Mrs. Price had seen Victor arguing with a city man. Was the scarred man Edmund, or another player? She thought of a case where two thieves had split their work, one stealing, the other selling. Victor was the thief, but Edmund might be the brains. She signalled Inspector Craddock, who was near the band, dressed as a villager. "Inspector," she whispered, "Victor's moving. And watch for a man with a scar, city type. He's part of this." Craddock nodded, his face grim. "We're ready. Clara says Victor asked her to signal him if the stall's unguarded. She told him she would, but she's with us." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Good girl, keep her safe, Inspector. And watch Victor's hands. He's clever, but hands betray." The dance grew livelier, the lanterns swaying in the breeze. Miss Marple stayed on her bench, her knitting a cover for her watchful eyes. Victor was back at the jewel store, talking to Sir Reginald, his smile bright but his fingers tapping the table. Clara was nearby, serving tea, her eyes darting to Miss Marple. Suddenly, a shout came from the art stall. A tray of paints had spilled, splashing the ground. The crowd turned, murmuring, and Sir Reginald stepped away from the case to look. Victor's hand moved, quick as a flash, toward the lock, a small tool glinting in his fingers. Miss Marple's breath caught, but she stayed still. Craddock's men were closer now, their hats low. Victor's tool touched the lock, but before he could turn it, Clara dropped a teacup, the crash loud in the night. Sir Reginald spun back, his eyes narrowing. Victor's hand dropped, the tool vanishing into his sleeve. He laughed, stepping away. "Clumsy girl," he said, his voice smooth. "Need help, Clara?" Clara shook her head, her face white. Miss Marple nodded to her, a tiny gesture. Clara had done her part, breaking Victor's move. But he wasn't done. Miss Marple saw it in his eyes, sharp and restless. She thought of a thief she'd known, caught because he tried again after a near miss. Victor would try again. The band played on, but the air felt heavy, like a storm brewing. Miss Marple saw the city man with the scar at the edge of the green, his hat low, his suit dark. He nodded to Victor, a quick jerk of his head, then slipped into the shadows. Victor's smile faded, his hand slipping into his pocket. Miss Marple signaled Craddock, who moved toward the shadows, his men following. She rose, her basket on her arm, and approached Clara. "Well done, dear," she whispered. "What did he say to you?" Clara's voice trembled. "He said to signal when Sir Reginald leaves the stall. Gave me a handkerchief to wave." "I didn't, Miss Marple, I swear." "I know," Miss Marple said, patting her arm. "You're brave, Clara. Stay near Sir Reginald now. Don't let Victor corner you." Clara nodded, hurrying to the stall. Miss Marple returned to her bench, her eyes on Victor. He was moving through the crowd, his smile back, but his steps were quick, heading toward the shadows where the city man had gone. Craddock's men were close, their movements silent. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face was calm. The trap was closing, but the scarred man was a loose thread. As the clock struck 11, the band paused and the crowd clapped. Sir Reginald stepped away from the stall to thank the musicians, leaving the case briefly unguarded. Victor was back, his hand moving to the lock again, the tool glinting. But Craddock was faster, his hand on Victor's shoulder. "Not so fast, Mr. Crane," he said, his voice low. "Step away." Victor froze, his smile gone. "What's this?" "I was just checking the lock." "Checking with a lockpick," Craddock said, holding up the tool he'd plucked from Victor's hand. The crowd gasped, drawing back. Sir Reginald stormed over, his face red. "You," he roared. "I knew it. Where's my brooch, Crane?" Victor's eyes darted, but his voice was smooth. "You're mistaken, Sir Reginald. I'm no thief. I was helping." Miss Marple stood, her basket swinging. "Helping, Mr. Crane? Like you helped Clara, asking her to spy? Or your friend in London, Edmund Langley, with his buyers?" Victor's face paled, his smile gone. "Edmund, I don't lie," Craddock said, his men closing in. "We traced your calls, and your friend with the scar, he's in custody. Edmund Langley, caught behind the stalls with a bag of tools." Miss Marple's heart skipped. Edmund, the scarred man. The pattern was clear now. She stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Mr. Crane, you're clever, but not clever enough. The emeralds, a fake, meant to draw you out. You took the brooch and the candelabra with Edmund's help. Your safe holds the proof, doesn't it? Victor's eyes widened, his hands shaking. You've got nothing on me, nothing. Craddock smiled, holding up a warrant. We'll see about that. We're searching your cottage now. Care to explain the safe behind your painting? The crowd murmured, eyes wide. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling. He asked me to spy, Sir Reginald. I didn't, but he offered me money. I told Miss Marple everything. Sir Reginald's face softened. Good girl, Clara. You're safe now. Victor's shoulders slumped, his charm gone. Craddock's men led him away, the crowd parting like a sea. Miss Marple watched, her needles clicking in her mind. The trap had snapped shut, but Edmund was the key. He'd planned the thefts, using Victor's charm to work the village. She thought of a case where a mastermind had hidden behind a frontman, caught because he trusted the wrong partner. Victor had trusted Edmund, and Clara had trusted her. That was the difference. The bazaar ended, the lanterns dimming. Miss Marple walked home, her basket light but her heart full. The village was quiet, but the air felt clear, like after a storm. The brooch and candelabra were still missing, but Craddock would find them, in Victor's safe or Edmund's hands. Her trap had worked, the pattern complete. She sat by her fire, knitting her scarf, her eyes twinkling. St. Mary Mead was safe again, and Miss Marple was ready for the next puzzle. Chapter 11. The pattern complete. The morning sun spilled over St. Mary Mead, turning the village green into a patchwork of light and shadow. The bazaar was gone, its stalls packed away, leaving only trampled grass and a few scattered petals. Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlour, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on her pink scarf. Her white hair was neat under a lace cap, and her blue eyes, sharp as ever, gazed out the window. The village was quiet now, its chatter softened after the dramatic night at the bazaar, where Victor Crane had been caught trying to steal the fake emerald, and Edmund Langley, the city man with the scar, was arrested in the shadows. The sapphire brooch and the church's silver candelabra were still missing, but Inspector Craddock's search of Victor's cottage promised answers. Miss Marple's trap had snapped shut, but the pattern wasn't quite complete. Today, she'd tie the final threads, and St. Mary Mead would breathe easy again. The thefts had stirred the village like a storm in a teacup. Victor, the art dealer with his slick smile and dark coat, had been the prime suspect, with Clara's sighting of a shadowy figure, Jenkins' glimpse of him near the manor, and scraps of black wool pointing to him. His debts, London buyers, and a forged painting in his cottage had tightened the net, while his bribe to Clara and link to Edmund Langley, Lady Harrow's cousin, had sealed his fate. The fake emerald at the bazaar, Miss Marple's clever lure, had drawn him out, and Clara's bravery had helped catch him. But questions lingered. Where were the stolen goods, and was Edmund the mastermind? Miss Marple's mind was like her knitting, each clue a stitch, and she was ready to finish the pattern. A knock came at her door, and Clara stepped in, her face less pale but still nervous. Her apron was clean, her brown eyes wide. Miss Marple, Sir Reginald wants you at the manor, she said. They found something, and Inspector Craddock's there. They're asking for you. Miss Marple set her knitting down, her smile kind. Thank you, Clara. You've been very brave through all this. How are you feeling? Clara twisted her hands, her cheeks pink. Better, now that Mr. Crane's caught, but I'm still shaky. He scared me, Miss Marple, with his money and his eyes. You did wonderfully, Miss Marple said, patting her arm. Come with me to the manor. You're part of this, too. They walked down the lane, the village waking slowly. The manor loomed ahead, its grey stone walls stern under the sun. Sir Reginald met them at the door, his moustache twitching less than usual, his face almost cheerful. "Miss Marple, you're a marvel," he boomed. "Craddock's in the library. Come see what we've got." The library was warm, its tall windows letting in light that danced on the polished floor. The empty case where the sapphire brooch had sat was still there, but a velvet cloth now held the brooch itself, its deep blue gems sparkling like a star. Beside it stood the silver candelabra, its intricate swirls gleaming. Inspector Craddock was there, his square jaw relaxed, a rare smile on his face. "Miss Marple, we found them," he said, waving at the treasures. "In Victor's safe, behind that painting you mentioned. You were right." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, but her voice was soft. "I'm glad, Inspector. But tell me, how did it all come together?" Craddock gestured to a chair, and they sat, Clara hovering near the door. Sir Reginald poured tea, his hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. "We searched Victor's cottage last night," Craddock said. "The safe was tricky, but we got it open. The brooch, the candelabra, and a stack of letters from Edmund Langley. He was the brains, Miss Marple, planned the thefts, sent Victor to do the work." Miss Marple nodded, her mind tracing the pattern. "And Edmund, what did you find on him?" Craddock held up a notebook. "Caught him behind the stalls, like you said. He had tools, a lockpick, a crowbar and a ticket to London. Confessed when we pressed him. Said he was in debt, owed thousands to some rough types. He knew Victor from art deals, roped him in to steal the brooch and candelabra to sell in London." Sir Reginald grunted, his face red again. "Scoundrels, both of them. My mother's brooch, treated like a trinket." Miss Marple's eyes were on Clara, who stood quietly, her hands clasped, and Clara's roll. She asked, her voice gentle, "She helped us, but there's more, isn't there?" Clara's cheeks flushed, her eyes dropping. Craddock glanced at her, his smile fading. "She's been brave, but she held back something. Tell her, Clara." Clara's voice trembled, barely a whisper. I didn't tell everything, Miss Marple. That night, when I saw the man in the dark coat, I heard him speak. It wasn't Mr. Crane. It was someone else, with a city accent. I was scared, so I didn't say." Miss Marple's heart skipped, but her face stayed calm. "Edmund wasn't. You recognized his voice later, from Victor's phone call." Clara nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Marple. I was afraid he'd come after me. But when Victor asked me to spy, I knew I had to help you. I couldn't let them win." Miss Marple patted her hand, her smile warm. "You did right, dear. That was brave, and it helped us see the truth." Sir Reginald softened, his voice gruff, but kind. "No harm done, Clara. You're a good girl. Stay on at the manor, and we'll say no more." Craddock leaned forward, his eyes on Miss Marple. "How did you know, Miss Marple? About Victor, Edmund, the trap?" She smiled, her needles clicking in her mind. "People are like knitting, Inspector. They leave loose threads, looks, words. Mistakes. Victor's charm was too smooth, like a man I knew who stole coins with a smile. His talk of debts, his forged painting, his safe, it all pointed to him. But the timing bothered me. He was at the pub when the candelabra was stolen, so someone else was there. Edmund's name kept coming up Clara's call. Mrs. Price's city man, Raymond Scar. They were partners, but Edmund was cleverer, staying in the shadows. Craddock nodded, his pen still. The letters in the safe spelled it out. Edmund planned the thefts, sent Victor to St. Mary Mead to charm the village. The black wool was Edmund's coat, not Victor's. He left it to throw us off. Miss Marple eyes twinkled. A clever trick, but tricks unravel. Clara's story, the lockpick, the emerald, they all led to them. People can't help showing who they are. Sir Reginald raised his tea. To you, Miss Marple. You saved my brooch and the church's silver. St. Mary Mead owes you. She shook her head, her smile modest. I only watched Sir Reginald. The village told me the rest. Clara stepped forward, her voice stronger. Miss Marple, I want to learn from you. You see things nobody else does. Miss Marple chuckled, patting her arm. You'll learn, dear. Just watch and listen. People always tell their own stories. They left the manor, the brooch and candelabra safe again. Miss Marple walked home, her basket swinging, the village, quiet under the sun. The green was empty now, the bazaar a memory, but the air felt light, like after a rain. She thought of a case years ago, a thief caught because he trusted the wrong person. Victor and Edmund had trusted each other, and Clara had trusted her. That was the pattern, complete at last. She sat by her fire, knitting her scarf, the pink wool soft in her hands. The village was safe, the puzzle solved. But St. Mary Mead was never still new. Threads would come, new patterns to weave. Her needles clicked, steady and sure, ready for the next story. Chapter 12. A Quiet Village. Almost the late afternoon sun draped St. Mary Mead in a soft golden glow, casting long shadows across the village green. The bazaar was a memory now, its stalls gone, leaving only a few stray ribbons fluttering in. The grass, Miss Jane Marple sat in her garden, her straw hat resting on a table beside her, her white hair neat under a laced cap. Her knitting needles clicked gently, working a pink scarf, while her blue eyes, sharp as ever, gazed at the roses. Climbing her fence, the village was calm again. Its chatter softened after the whirlwind of the stolen sapphire brooch and the church's silver candelabra. Victor Crane and Edmund Langley were in custody, caught by Miss Marple's clever trap with the fake emerald. At the bazaar, the stolen treasures were back with Sir Reginald Harrow and the church, thanks to Clara's bravery and Inspector Craddock's quick work. But Miss Marple's mind was never still, always searching for loose threads, and today a small one tugged at her, promising a new puzzle in the quiet village. The case had stirred St. Mary Mead like a gust through a quiet lane. Victor, the art dealer with his slick smile and dark coat, had been the prime suspect, with Clara's sighting of a shadowy figure, Jenkins' glimpse of him near the manor, and scraps of black wool pointing his way. His debts, forged painting, and hidden safe had tightened the net, while his bribe to Clara and link to Edmund, Lady Harrow's cousin, had confirmed his guilt. Clara's revelation that Edmund, not Victor, was the man in the dark coat had sealed the case, and the recovered treasures in Victor's safe had tied the pattern together. Miss Marple's trap with the fake emerald had drawn them out, and now the village was at peace. But peace in St. Mary Mead was like her knitting, never quite finished, always ready for a new stitch. A cheerful whistle broke her thoughts, and Raymond West appeared at her gate, his grin wide. Dolly Bantry was with him, her hat askew, her laugh carrying across the garden. "Aunt Jane," Raymond called, opening the gate. "You're the talk of the village, solving thefts like a detective in one of my novels." Miss Marple chuckled, setting her knitting down. "Nonsense, Raymond. I only listened and the village told me the rest. Come in, both of you. I've got tea ready. They settled in her parlour, the room cosy with a crackling fire and the scent of lavender. The teapot steamed, and scones sat on a plate, fresh from the oven. Dolly took a scone, her eyes bright. Jane, you're too modest. Catching Victor and Edmund like that, with a fake emerald. The whole village is buzzing. Tell us how you did it. Miss Marple poured tea, her smile gentle. It was simple, really. People are like my knitting, they leave loose ends. Victor's charm was too smooth, like a man I knew who stole coins with a smile. His talk of debts, his forged painting, his safe they all pointed to him. But the timing was wrong. He was at the pub when the candelabra was stolen, so someone else was there. Edmund's name kept coming up Clara's phone call. Mrs. Price's, city man. Raymond's, scarred stranger. They were partners, with Edmund pulling the strings. Raymond leaned forward, his tea untouched. But how did you know to use Clara? That was brilliant, getting her to play along with Victor's bribe. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Clara's a good girl, but young. Victor thought he could sway her with money, like a maid I knew who left a window open for a thief. I told her to pretend, to feed him lies about the manor. She was brave, and her slip about Edmund's voice, that was the key. It showed he was the man in the dark coat, not Victor. Dolly nodded, her scone forgotten, and those scraps of wool. Everyone thought they were Victor's, but they were Edmund's, weren't they? Yes, Miss Marple said, her voice soft. Edmund was clever, leaving them to point at Victor. But cleverness trips itself. The lockpick, the forged painting, the letters in the safe, they all told the truth. People can't help showing who they are. Raymond grinned, sipping his tea. You're a marvel, Aunt Jane. But what about the candelabra? How did they get it out of the church? Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. Edmund was the planner. He knew the church's locks, probably from his visit to the manor. Victor charmed the village, keeping eyes on him, while Edmund slipped in at night. The wool was his mistake. He didn't expect Mrs. Weatherby's nosy walks. Dolly laughed, her hat bobbing. Mrs. Weatherby, she's still telling everyone she caught the thief. But Jane, you're the one who saw it all. Miss Marple shook her head, her smile modest. I only watched, Dolly. The village did the rest. They sipped tea, the fire crackling, but Miss Marple's mind was on a new thread. At the bazaar, Mrs. Price had mentioned a missing jar of her prize-winning jam. Vanished from the stall the same night as Victor's attempt on the emerald. It was a small thing, but St. Mary Mead's small things often hid bigger secrets. She thought of a case years ago, a stolen pie that led to a hidden grudge. Was the jam just a prank, or something more? She turned to Raymond, her voice casual. Raymond, you were at the jam stall, weren't you? Did you see anyone lingering? Maybe young Tommy, the butcher's boy. Raymond frowned, thinking. Tommy, he was there, helping Mrs. Price. Kept dropping jars, clumsy as anything. Why, Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Just curious. Mrs. Price said a jar of her best jam went missing that night. Odd, don't you think, with all the excitement? Dolly's eyes widened. A stolen jam jar. Jane, you're not starting another mystery, are you? Miss Marple chuckled, her needles clicking. Not a big one, Dolly, but small things matter. Tommy's a good boy, but boys get hungry, or they play pranks. Or maybe someone else took it, someone with a reason. Raymond laughed, shaking his head. Aunt Jane, you see puzzles everywhere. Tommy probably ate it. He's always sneaking. Sweets, perhaps, Miss Marple said, her voice soft, but her mind was busy. Tommy had delivered a package for Victor, no questions asked. Was he just a boy, or was he tangled in something? She thought of a village lad years ago who'd taken a cake to hide a note for a thief. Small thefts could hide big secrets. They finished their tea, and Raymond and Dolly left, promising to spread the tale of Miss Marple's triumph. She walked to the village shop, her basket swinging, the air cool with evening. Mrs. Price was there, stacking jars, her face grumpy. "Miss Marple, you caught those thieves, but my jam's still gone. Best batch I ever made, vanished at the bazaar." Miss Marple nodded, picking up a tin of biscuits. "That's a shame, Mrs. Price. Was Tommy helping you that night?" Mrs. Price snorted, helping, dropping jars, more like, "He was there when I noticed the jam missing, but he swore he didn't take it. Cheeky lad." Miss Marple's heart skipped, but her smile was sweet. Boys will be boys. Did anyone else come by? "Only Miss Hartnell," Mrs. Price said. "She bought 2 jars, but I checked mine were all accounted for, except that one." Miss Marple thanked her and walked home, her mind spinning. Tommy or someone else. She saw him across the green, kicking a ball, his face red from running. He waved, his grin wide, but his eyes darted away. She thought of a case where a boy had stolen to impress a friend. Was Tommy hiding something, or was it just jam? Back in her parlor, she sat by the fire, knitting and thinking. The brooch and candelabra were safe, Victor and Edmund caught, the village calm. But the jam jar nagged her, a loose thread in her pattern. She'd watch Tommy, ask a few questions, listen to the village. St. Mary Mead was quiet, but never still. New puzzles. Waited, small or large, and Miss Marple was ready. Her needles clicked, steady and sure, weaving the next story. Chapter 13. The village settles. The early evening light bathed St. Mary Mead in a soft, rosy hue, painting the cottages with warmth and turning the village green into a patchwork of gold and green. Miss Jane Marple sat in her garden, her straw hat resting on a wicker table, her white hair neat under a laced cap. Her knitting needles clicked steadily, weaving the final rose of a pink scarf, while her blue eyes, sharp as ever, gazed at the roses climbing her fence. The village was calm, its usual quiet restored after the whirlwind of the stolen sapphire brooch and the church's silver candelabra. Victor Crane and Edmund Langley were in custody, caught by Miss Marple's clever trap with the fake emerald. At the bazaar, the stolen treasures were back with Sir Reginald Harrow and St. Mary's Church. Thanks to Clara's bravery and Inspector Craddock's diligence, but a small thread, the missing jam jar from the bazaar, tugged at Miss Marple's mind. A final puzzle to tie up before the village could truly settle. Tonight she'd unravel it, and St. Mary Mead would rest easy. The thefts had stirred the village like a sudden breeze through a sleepy lane. Victor, the art dealer with his slick smile and dark coat, had been the prime suspect, with Clara's sighting of a shadowy figure, Jenkins' glimpse of him near the manor, and scraps of black wall pointing his way. His debts, forged painting, hidden, safe, and bribe to Clara had tightened the net, while his link to Edmund, Lady Harrow's cousin, had confirmed their partnership. Clara's revelation that Edmund was the man in the dark coat had sealed the case, and the recovered treasures in Victor's safe had completed the pattern. The fake emerald had drawn them out, and Miss Marple's trap had snapped shut. But the missing jam jar, mentioned by Mrs. Price, hinted at a smaller mystery, one Miss Marple couldn't resist. Was it young Tommy, the butcher's boy, playing a prank, or something more? Her mind was like her knitting, always seeking the final stitch. A cheerful laugh broke her thoughts, and Dolly Bantry appeared at the gate, her hat slightly askew, her arms full of flowers from her garden. "Jane, you're a marvel," she called. "Bustling in, the village is singing your praises. Victor and Edmund locked up, the brooch and candelabra back. St. Mary Mead owes you a statue." Miss Marple chuckled, setting her knitting down. "Nonsense, Dolly. I only watched and listened. Come in, have some tea. I've scones fresh from the oven." Dolly settled in the parlor, the room cozy with a crackling fire and the scent of lavender. The teapot steamed, and Miss Marple poured, her hands steady. "Tell me, Dolly," she said, "what's the village saying now? Any talk about that missing jam jar?" Dolly's eyes widened, her scone pausing mid-bite. "You're still on. The Jane, you've solved 2 thefts, and you're chasing jam. Mrs. Price is grumbling, says it was her best batch. She's blaming Tommy, says he was clumsy at the stall." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Tommy's a good boy, but boys get into mischief. I thought I saw him near the jam stall, looking guilty. Have you heard anything else?" Dolly thought, her brow creasing. "Miss Hartnell said she saw Tommy with a jar behind the church the night of the bazaar. Thought he was eating it, but he ran off when she called. Why, Jane? Is it more than a prank?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her voice soft. "Small things hide big secrets. I knew a boy once who took a pie to pass a note to a thief. Tommy delivered a package for Victor, didn't he?" "No questions asked." Dolly gasped, her teacup clattering. "You think Tommy's mixed up with Victor? Oh, Jane, that's dreadful." "Not mixed up," Miss Marple said, her smile gentle. "Just young and curious. But I'll find out. Let's take a walk, Dolly. The village always tells its stories." They left the cottage, the evening air cool, the green quiet except for children playing near the church. Miss Marple's basket swung on her arm, her black shoes tapping the stones. They passed the shop, where Mrs. Price was sweeping, her face. "Still grumpy, Miss Marple," she called. "Any luck with my jam?" "I'm sure it was Tommy. He's been sneaking around since the bazaar." Miss Marple smiled, buying a tin of tea. "I'm looking into it, Mrs. Price. Did Tommy say anything?" "That night," Mrs. Price snorted, "said he didn't take it, but his hands were sticky. And he was fidgety, kept looking at the church. Cheeky lad." Miss Marple's heart skipped, but her face stayed calm. Sticky hands, the church. She thought of a case where a boy had hidden stolen goods in a churchyard, thinking no one would look. Was Tommy hiding the jam, or something else? "Thank you, Mrs. Price," she said. "I'll have a word with him." They walked to the church, where the vicar, Leonard Clement, was polishing the candelabra, now safely back on the altar. He looked up, his glasses glinting. "Jane, you're a blessing to this village. The candelabra's home, thanks to you." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes on the churchyard. "I'm glad, Leonard. Tell me, have you seen young Tommy lately? Near the church, perhaps?" Leonard nodded, wiping his hands. "Funny you ask. He was here yesterday, poking around the gravestones. Said he was playing, but he looked nervous. Dropped something, a cloth. I think hand ran off." Miss Marple's needles would have clicked if she'd had them. A cloth, like Victor's handkerchief. Used to signal Clara. Was Tommy more involved than she thought? She thanked Leonard and walked to the churchyard, Dolly trailing behind. The gravestones were old, mossy, and a patch of disturbed earth caught her eye near a yew tree. She knelt, her knees creaking, and brushed the soil aside. There, half buried, was Mrs. Price's jam jar, its label bright but smudged. Beside it was a folded cloth, stained with jam, and a small note tucked inside. Dotty gasped, "Jane, you found it. But why hide a jam jar?" Miss Marple unfolded the note, her eyes sharp. It was in Victor's handwriting, addressed to Tommy. "Deliver this to the city man, no questions. 5 shillings for you." Her heart raced, but her voice was calm. Tommy wasn't stealing jam, Dolly. He was passing messages for Victor, probably to Edmund. The jam was a cover, something no one would suspect. Dolly's eyes widened. "A cover? Oh, Jane, you see everything. Is Tommy in trouble?" "Not if we handle it right," Miss Marple said, wrapping the jar and note in her handkerchief. "Let's find him. He's young, not a criminal. He needs a talking to, not a cell." They found Tommy at the green, kicking a ball, his face red from running. He froze when he saw Miss Marple, his eyes darting to her basket. "Miss Marple," he mumbled, "I didn't mean no harm." She smiled, her voice gentle but firm. "I know, Tommy, but you took Mrs. Price's jam, didn't you? And carried notes for Mr. Crane." Tommy's shoulders slumped, his eyes on the ground. "He gave me shillings, said it was just messages. I didn't know he was a thief, honest. The jam, I took it to hide the note, like he said. I buried it so no one would find it." Miss Marple nodded, patting his arm. "You're a good boy, Tommy, but you made a mistake. Tell Inspector Craddock everything, and give Mrs. Price a new jar. She'll forgive you." Tommy nodded, tears in his eyes. "I will, Miss Marple. I'm sorry." Dolly shook her head, her hat bobbing. "Jane, you're too kind. But you're right to me, no thief, just a boy." They walked to the police station, where Craddock was sorting papers. He looked up, his smile wide. "Miss Marple, you never stop, do you? What's this about a jam jar?" She handed him the jar and note, her voice soft. "A small thread, Inspector. Tommy was Victor's messenger, not a thief. The note's in Victor's hand, proof he used the boy. No need to punish him." A word with his father. Craddock read the note, his face grim. Another nail in Victor's coffin, and Edmund's. "We found more letters in his London flat, tying him to the thefts. They're both going away for a long time." Miss Marple nodded, her mind at ease. The pattern was complete, every stitch in place. Victor and Edmund were caught, the brooch and candelabra safe, and Tommy's mistake was just that, a mistake. She thought of a case years ago, a boy who'd stolen to impress a friend, saved by a kind word. Tommy would be fine, and so would St. Mary Mead. She walked home with Dolly, the village settling into dusk. The green was quiet, the cottages glowing, with lamplight. Sir Reginald was at the manor, his treasures safe. Clara was back at work, her bravery praised. The church shone with its candelabra, and Mrs. Price would have her jam story to tell for years. Miss Marple sat by her fire, her needles clicking, the pink scarf nearly done. St. Mary Mead was peaceful, its secrets unravelled, but she knew the village new threads would come, new patterns to weave. She smiled, her eyes twinkling, ready for whatever came next.